screen is displayed because I'm not doing that. Okay?
Okay, ready?
Yes, thank you. Right, it's just notified me.
An error occurred. Please
Okay,
try again
the
later.
Hangout screen is displayed because I'm not doing that. Oh, I'm hearing myself.
Okay, ready?
Yes, thank you. Okay, it's broadcasting sound, Sam. Mute yourself. Okay, so good evening. Well, I say good evening. I've got 2 continental viewers to date. Oh, and an Aussie. So, well, to the 2 continental viewers, it's much closer to midnight than anything. Sadly, today, Modwayne is indisposed. He has a medical condition which afflicts his ability to speak. And so, in order not to interrupt the service, I have decided to go solo today. And the good news is, yeah, that was San. She was just setting the stream going because Modwayne's had to go back to bed because he's poorly. But San's not going to participate in the room. Oops. Hi, Anitak. Sorry, I'm being distracted. Okay, so what am I going to do today? Well, nothing exciting, that's for sure. I have a couple of little stories I want to discuss and some other stuff, and I also have something I wrote, a story, not a news story, but a story I wrote. And I thought I could entertain you, or otherwise, because it's quite long, with my said story. And is that okay? And also, because I'm alone, I am happy to have people come on the stream if they think they would like to, because then there'll be fewer uncomfortable silences and me fumbling around going, I don't know what I'm doing, and things like that, what I do from time to time. And I'm drinking coffee. Sorry about the slurping. So, we have a small audience. I might as well begin. So I'm going to read you a little thing. This is the very first thing I posted to the interwebs. My very first thing. In fact, I've even dated it the 26th of August 2016. So a week or so under 3 years ago. That's the very first upload I made to the internet, and the first thing I posted was this. I've titled it A Scientific Creation Story. The style might be a little familiar to anyone who knows the King James Bible, which is deliberate. Okay. In the beginning was the bang. No one knows what came before the bang, or even if it is meaningful to say before. For the bang created space-time for our universe, that is both space and time. After the bang, the universe was very small, very hot, and full of fundamental particles. Not even atoms, not even the components of atoms, such as electrons, protons, and neutrons. The universe was too hot, and the particles were too condensed to assemble into anything of greater structure. And this was the plasma. The plasma had no form, but within it were tiny perturbations. With the bang came the 4 fundamental forces: the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, electromagnetism, and gravity. There were also the laws. There were a number of laws, and the nature of these laws determined the nature of the universe that developed. After a very short time, an amazing event occurred called inflation. The universe grew enormously in size very, very quickly. This inflation changed the universe, for it was no longer very dense and no longer so hot that the fundamental particles couldn't stabilize into fixed forms. So the fundamental particles took form, and these were the two most simple elements. Most was hydrogen and the rest was helium. For 200 million years, the universe was black. There was matter, there was energy, there was heat, but there was no light. But the force of gravity acted upon the tiny perturbations that had existed in the plasma. The perturbations meant that the matter wasn't distributed entirely uniformly. Where matter was even only slightly more dense, gravity began to create localized concentrations. These became gas clouds, and the bigger the cloud became, the bigger the effect, until there were vast regions of space which had little matter within it, but hundreds of billions of regions containing concentrations of matter. These regions were called galaxies. The gas within galaxies formed into huge clouds called nebulae. Within the nebulae, the process of gravity continued until areas became so dense that something amazing happened. Under the density and the heat generated by that density, the atoms started to react using the process called nuclear fusion. And so one day, 300 million years or so after the bang, there was light. For visible light is just a specific part of the spectrum of radiation. All warm bodies radiate, but now it was happening in the visible range, and the ball of dense matter emitting the light was called a star. Stars of different sizes came to form. What happened to the star depended upon how large it was. If the star was relatively small, it burned slowly, lasting billions of years, until all of the hydrogen and then the helium was used up. But if a star was large, it burnt quickly, and the largest stars burnt very quickly indeed. But more importantly, they were so heavy that they collapsed under their own mass. And when they collapsed, there was an explosion of unparalleled force. These explosions were supernovae. A supernovae could shine with the brightness of 1 billion stars. They were the brightest objects ever known, and within the supernovae were the only conditions for making heavier elements like iron and carbon. And all of the elements created in a supernova were blown into space by the incredible force of the explosion. But the heavier elements didn't disappear. Eventually, they coalesced into yet more nebulae, forming another generation of star systems. As the elements became heavier and heavier, gravity acted more quickly. With the heavier elements, when a star formed, it could be circled by planets and other objects. The elements being formed obeyed the laws. Because of the laws, different elements had different properties, and the different properties caused them to behave in different ways in the company of other elements. Hydrogen and oxygen had a particular affinity, and so water became abundant. Iron and oxygen also had an affinity, and so iron oxide was made. There were many, many others, but in each case, sets of atoms combined to form a molecule. There was one particular combination of elements that really liked to combine. But when they did so, they produced molecules of enormous size, complexity, and variety. These were the hydrocarbons. As billions of years passed, there were 100 billion galaxies, and each galaxy could contain several 100 billion stars, and many of those stars had planets. In one of those galaxies, around one of those stars, a planet formed that was just right. It was the correct distance from the star for water to be liquid. It had an atmosphere protected by a magnetic field. A moon formed at a suitable distance to protect the planet. When the planet was formed, it was bombarded with asteroids and comets, and they brought water and hydrocarbons onto the planet. And the conditions were just right, and as the planet cooled, oceans formed. Within those oceans were the conditions for life. There were two sources of energy needed to power life. Where oceans were shallow, energy could come from the star. And at the bottom of the oceans, at any depth, there were the hydrothermal vents, where heat came up from the center of the planet along with a cocktail of nutrients. And after only 1 billion years of countless chemical reactions, life began. Life was simple, but slowly it evolved. Although life was very simple, consisting of a single cell, that cell itself became an incredibly complex system by itself. Different types of life combined. Photosynthesizing algae and bacteria were absorbed into life that had motion, and symbiosis came to be. And so it remained for another 2 billion years. Life was simple and short, but abundant. It evolved. Some life harnessed natural resources, but other life came to live off the first type and each other. And after untold generations, there was an accident. Instead of separating into two separate entities, as had always happened when celled life reproduced asexually, the two cells remained together. These twin cell creatures managed to survive long enough to evolve. Some evolved so that, although genetically identical, the two cells had different functions, and this gave these new creatures an advantage. Now, evolution is a strange process. It comes from mutation. Most mutations confer no advantage and are more likely to confer a disadvantage. But occasionally a mutation occurs which is beneficial. It doesn't have to be by much, but just enough to increase the proportion of beings with the mutation in the overall population. Each mutation is small, so small that it can be difficult to distinguish the mutated creature from the pre-mutated creature. But after a number of mutations have occurred, there is such a large cumulative effect that the mutated line comes to be considered a different species. But all life had a single origin, a single common ancestor, for all life uses the same genetic system. Once our two-cell creatures had evolved specialization of the cells, the process increased in pace exponentially. From there being no multi-cell creatures, there was suddenly an enormous variety, and the size of creatures increased to accommodate it. The increase was so large that the bigger creatures were no longer even aware of those that remained the original size. The specialization of cells continued in amazing directions. There were cells to detect outside stimuli, whether light, sound, heat, electrical impulses, or vibrations. There were cells for motion from cilia to limbs. There were mouths to consume nutrients, digestive tracts to ingest nutrients, and orifices to dispose of waste material. There were nervous systems to control the bodies the creatures had become, and brains to process the input stimuli and regulate the functioning of the body. For all the different types of specialization, certain types proved especially advantageous and evolved separately time and again. Eyes are one of those types. But as life evolved, some life became unable to compete and so became extinct. And the planet kept changing. And when life had evolved for one environment and the planet kept changing. And when life which had evolved for one environment found that environment gone, it too died out. And there were very occasional huge natural disasters. And these too caused extinction, the mass extinctions. And all these forces had operated over hundreds of millions of years. The vast majority of life forms that had ever lived had become extinct. Life existed only in the oceans at first, but eventually emerged onto the land. And as life evolved and competed with each other, both within and between species, symbiotic relations continued to develop. Types of life arose that could not complete their life cycle without the assistance of separate species. And so was the circle of life and the formation of ecosystems. For vast periods of time, different forms of life dominated. Once life had emerged onto the land, there was the age of reptiles. That was followed by the age of the dinosaurs. Each period was ended by a mass extinction, which created such a void that a different surviving form of life was able to evolve to fill it. But for all these different forms of life, none of them had that unique awareness that we call human intelligence. And that human intelligence might never have happened if an asteroid of sufficient size hadn't hit the planet at a point rich in hydrocarbons and the time it did, causing such devastation that the dinosaurs never recovered, except when they evolved into birds. But the era of human intelligence had to wait. It started with a small vole-like creature that managed to survive the devastation that ended the dominance of the dinosaurs. Soon, the vole-like creature, a mammal, began to evolve with incredible diversity. The size of mammals ranged from the tiny to the enormous. There were the herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. But still, none had human intelligence. For 16 million years and more, mammals kept evolving, but intelligence was limited. Then in Africa, a species of primate left the jungle and moved onto the savannah. This primate wasn't large or strong and had no natural weapons. To survive, it stood up straight. It defended itself with tools and weapons that it found or constructed. It cooperated by developing communication, and eventually that communication became language. No longer specific sounds, but sounds with meaning. To process these sounds and to outthink its predators, the brains of these primates grew. Over millions of years, there were several species of the primates, and some of them dispersed across the planet. There was a trend with these species, however. Their brains became larger and their size became bigger. But the survival of these creatures wasn't guaranteed. Of all of the descendant species of the primates, only one survived. The rest became extinct. And even for the surviving species, there was a time when they numbered only a few thousand themselves on the brink of extinction. So after only 13.7 billion years, generations of stars, 4.6 billion years of its own solar system, and after 99% of all species of life ever to have existed had become extinct, there arose human intelligence and the species which possessed it. Somehow, Homo sapiens prospered and spread throughout the world. Many changed in outward appearance. so much that even though they remained so much alike, many mistook them for different races. With the advent of human intelligence came language. With language came the marvel that is abstract thought. In their spare time, some of the primates began to ponder on the origins of all they could survey. They didn't know about the vastness of the universe, or about its expansion, of the laws, or how everything that isn't hydrogen or helium is made out of stardust formed in the hearts of stars and the violence of supernovae. Being alone as the only creatures with human intelligence, the primates began to invent all kinds of imaginary beings and creatures. They imbue these beings and creatures with human characteristics. Some of the creatures were labelled good, and some were labelled bad. Very few were considered to be neutral or a combination of both, even though that was the way of it for the primates. Because the imaginary beings and creatures were imaginary, their existence was never known, but equally, their existence could never be disproved. For you cannot disprove a negative. And after enough time, what started as a product of the imagination began to be accepted as true. So much so that many of the primates and the societies they created became based around their fictional beliefs about these imaginary beings and creatures. It came to pass that some of the imaginary beings became to be considered as actually creating the universe for the sole benefit of the primates. So it came to be that these imaginary beings came to be revered and their imaginary commands had to be obeyed. Sophisticated rituals were devised to propitiate these imaginary beings. Natural phenomena such as the rising of the star as the planet rotated became to be viewed as being conditional upon the continued goodwill of the imaginary being. Time, effort, resources were poured into satisfying the imaginary desires of the imaginary beings. Human sacrifices would be made. Huge temples were built. There were sacrifices of animals and property. Yet the imaginary beings were transitory. Under the right conditions, the fervent belief in one being quickly turned into the equally fervent belief in another being. Just as the vast majority of life forms became extinct, so did belief in the vast majority of imaginary beings. The nature of the beliefs evolved. They started as belief in natural spirits, turned into a plethora of petty gods, until only a single god or small number of gods were all that were left. But the beliefs evolved features that ensured their survival. These included severe penalties for non-believers and the ritualized raising of young primates in the belief of their community. Then, after many generations, there came a point where there were only a few communities of believers. Some of these communities were vast, yet everything was strange. The different sets of belief that survived were incompatible, even when they shared common origins. Most believers held the belief that they were born into, the beliefs of their community, which just happened to have the right beliefs. The believers became increasingly aware of and familiar with the other incompatible beliefs. Communities of the different beliefs could often coexist in the same geographical area, and despite the incompatibilities, these communities were often very amicable and lasted for hundreds of years peacefully and often to the betterment of all sides. Yet where the communities were more homogeneous and separated, conflict between them frequently arose. Violence and bloody wars were fought. Much hatred and distrust was fostered. But during all this time, human intelligence discovered science and reason. The knowledge of the primates increased so much that they discovered the true origins of the universe. They discovered the laws. They came to realize the imaginary nature of the beliefs in supernatural beings. Many threw off the shackles of belief in the imaginary beings and became atheists. They said, "Why have conflict over beliefs that are untrue? They said, why waste valuable resources of time and effort and material on imaginary notions? And they added, why don't we all just live in peace and harmony? We have enough problems to worry about. So I'm struggling to keep a straight face at this. To worry about, such as disease, famine, poverty, global warming. If we stop fighting over imaginary beings, we can combine to make the world better. But the believers hated these people much more than they hated each other. Even though many of the believers claimed to only want peace, they said that had to be achieved through violence and war. And the believers who did only want peace refused to turn on the ones advocating violence and war. They would cry, but we don't want that, it's not our fault. They didn't realise that they were the only ones who could defeat the aggressors. And so the story of creation has reached the present. Not an end, for it continues. And who will win? Will it be the atheists who want to use science and reason, or the communities of believers in imaginary beings? The end. It's a story, Michael. Shouldn't take it so literally. Okay. Well, that was the first thing I wrote. But hey, I just wrote it off the top of my head. Nicer words for Catholic priests. Okay, well, that went down like a lead balloon, but that's okay. Everyone. No. Earlier, you muttered about the inaccuracies. You put, well, he reads good, but the facts are outdated. It's just a story. It wasn't meant to be literal. Anatak, have I narrated audiobooks? Alicia's asked me to do hers. Yeah, it's the point was to do a version of the Genesis story, but based more upon science. It's not meant to be literally accurate. It's supposed to juxtapose the let there be light, and in 7 days there was heaven, earth, and man. And it took 13.7 billion years. But yes, I liked it, but then I wrote it, so I would. Even though the end was really cringy, for which I apologise, because it was pretty grim. What was I thinking? Okay, so I would just like to mention a couple of news stories I stumbled across, looking desperately for anything to talk about. Both happened to come out of America, and the reason both of these piqued my interest was the fact that I have this attitude to confirmation bias. We're all subject to confirmation bias, but I believe that if you are aware of your biases, you can then look for evidence to counter them. One of the I'll start with this one. So you may all be aware of all the hate crime hoaxes, especially coming out of America, especially with that crazy actor guy. I've got his name, Jussie Smollett. And I've actually found a story of an actual hate crime. And so I thought I would just share it with you so that you can say, yes, there actually is one. Okay. So this is, it's actually from The Independent via Yahoo from yesterday. And it says, an Illinois man has been charged with a hate crime after allegedly yelling anti-Mexican slurs at a Hispanic motorcyclist while chasing him with an ice pick. he was 72 years old. I won't read his name. He climbed out of his car to shout racist abuse at the biker who had a Mexican flag on his vehicle, according to Lake County Sheriff's Office. Mr. What's-his-face had been driving his Hyundai in the village of somewhere or other on Wednesday when he abruptly changed lanes, cutting off the 57-year-old motorcyclist. As the biker attempted to obtain the license number of the Hyundai, our batshit crazy man began yelling anti-Mexican racial slurs, expletives at the victim and told him to go back to his country. The officer added he then retrieved an ice pick from his vehicle. I mean, why do Americans have ice picks in their vehicles? And began chasing the victim with it, continuing to yell racial slurs and racial expletives. Well, I agree with you, Jimmy, but the point is that we hear all these hoaxes about things that are allegedly done for racial motives, and I think the story as told by the newspaper does indicate an offence done for racial motives. And the point being is this is so rare that it's good to point it out and say, yes, there actually is one. Okay, one. Not the hundreds, just one. Depends what sort of ice pick. If it's sort of ice pick Jimmy was talking about, Michael, then not much use. I think that's the sort of ice pick Americans usually have, but I could be wrong. Yeah. Okay. Then the second story is another confirmation bias breaking story, but in a much more positive way. You may be familiar with lots of stories of late about the phenomenal leniency given to women for committing rather heinous crimes. While this isn't exactly not that, what I like about this story is the local people got rather upset at the leniency. So, okay. This is again from the Independent, and this is as written, so my apologies. At first, the high school football players thought the woman waving the gun was joking. Then she started yelling and cursing before forcing them to the ground. The four boys, aged 15 and 16, had spent the morning in their Arkansas town going door to door selling discount cards for their annual high school football team fundraiser. This took them to the home of a 46-year-old stranger named Jerry Kelly on the 3rd of August. Before the teenagers even knocked on her door, Ms. Kelly emerged with a chrome-plated revolver, according to a police report. She swore she told them to lie down, spread their legs, and place her arms behind their backs, the boys told police. When they tried to explain they were fundraising for school, not stealing, she allegedly called them liars. When one black teenager tried to swat a mosquito, Ms. Kelly allegedly threatened to shoot if he didn't stop moving. We was scared, one of the teens told police. I thought she was going to shoot me in the head, how she was acting. She has been charged with 4 counts, each of aggravated assault and false imprisonment, both felonies, and 4 counts of endangering the welfare of a minor, a misdemeanor. Seems a bit odd, that. The former law enforcement employee and wife of a cross-country jail administrator was arrested, booked and bonded out on the 12th of August without having her mugshot taken. Locals were critical of the treatment, calling it preferential. And that was the bit that struck me, that someone was finally calling out the female privilege, which I thought was nice, especially as it was four black lads, and thus, nice and not racist. But yeah, so it's nice to see local communities finally getting a bit pissed off with some of the leniency shown to some of these ne'er-do-wells. So I thought that was interesting. For my next segment, I was watching Charlie Kirk on Dave Rubin. If you don't know who Charlie Kirk is the founder and head of Turning Point USA. Turning Point USA are the largest conservative student organization in the United States. And they've done, I saw a video of a meeting they had here in the UK, which had 2 British members and Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens. And I know Candace Owens is not everyone's cup of tea, but she did perform very well. And anyway, so he's on Dave Rubin, and Charlie Kirk's basically, a conservative. So on the American right, not the British right, because the British Conservatives aren't conservatives anymore. And repeatedly confessed to being an evangelical Christian. However, he's also a libertarian, which, for all the batshit crazies of economics to do with the libertarians, though this will come back in a moment, socially, I am incredibly libertarian. And so it would listen to him. And one of my big criticisms of the conservative right, the free marketeers, has been their obsession with being anti-government and pro-private industry, irrespective of how bad the private industry is. And Charlie Kirk was essentially coming round to the view that actually, and he actually said, Google are a bigger threat than government. Which is like, oh, for fuck's sake, finally. It's like blatantly obvious. It's not being government that makes government bad. It's being large and powerful that makes government bad. And if private endeavours can have the same amount of power and influence, then it doesn't matter whether they're the government or not, because they'll just make the government do what they want them to do. And what I've been noticing of late is, so you got people like Charlie Kirk. So he's a conservative evangelical Christian. And he's talking to Dave Rubin, and they're basically pretty much agreeing on everything. And then I've also been listening to Brendan O'Neill on the Spike podcast, and he's, sort of like, well, he's quite close to me, a left libertarian, but slightly more left than me. And yet what Brendan O'Neill says and what Charlie Kirk says are almost identical, which I find weird. Well, not really. I understand it. But it's like, if you just go off, oh, he's left and he's right, but they're actually... good night, Jimmy. Thank you for coming. So you seem to be all providing your own entertainment, which is fine. And if anyone saw Sargon's interview with the Muslim guy, what does that do with it? Stupid man. There, that one. he did a video a couple of days ago. What do the Birmingham anti-LGBT Muslim protesters want? And again, the Muslim guy, sounded really interesting and well-spoken and very moderate. And, you know, Sargon kept saying, I agree. And it's like, interesting this, you've got all this huge range, all pretty much agreeing on the same thing. And then that lunatic fringe, we'll call them the left, who are the ones out of lockstep of the vast majority of everyone else, and yet they're the ones driving the agenda, driving what's discussed. You talk about the Muslim guy, Michael. Yes, he was. I was very impressed with him, very impressed. And one of the things that Dave Rubin asked Charlie Kirk was, okay, so we're agreed, that's Dave and Charlie, that it is the right now who are the liberals, the people who have acceptance and tolerance and willing to talk and are open-minded. What went wrong for the Conservatives in the past? And, you know, I mean, the answer to that is immediate and very short. It's evangelical Christians. And the problem was, as the way I see it is, so the evangelical Christians, at least from what I know, because I'm not American, so I can't profess a perfect knowledge, but the evangelical Christians behaved with a similar kind of attitude to what the SJWs do now. I'm not saying they're as bad, and I don't want to compare the two. I'm just trying to make an analogy of a kind of authoritarianism. And it is interesting to see the same evangelical group now much less authoritarian, basically because they haven't got the power. And thus, to an extent, and I don't want to over egg this as an explanation, to an extent one can look at the cultural dominance, the possession of the ability to drive the narrative that is the common factor in these groups being unpleasant. Because if you ask me, it's like, you know, you look at the SJWs, people about the gay lobby, how does the gay lobby get away with it? And it's all about momentum. They get accepted, and that gives them momentum. And then they don't know how to stop because it's not in their psyche. They've never experienced it. They have no understanding of constraint. And there will always be somebody with another batshit idea to push on top of what's already gone before. And it takes a humbling, as happened to the American evangelical right, for people to say, perhaps we shouldn't insist on what we want, but should actually have live and let live, which is what happens when other people aren't letting you live and let live. Suddenly you see the value of it. And I just found it an interesting transformation over the decades of the one group from dominant to resistant, and the other group from resistant to dominant, and then mirroring exactly the behavior they complained so vehemently about in the previous dominant group. without the slightest self-awareness or hesitation. But as I say, I'm a social libertarian, so I'm like all for, you do you, just leave me alone. And if we could get everyone to be a social libertarian, the world wouldn't be like it is. What happened, evolution hasn't equipped many of our species that way. But it would be nice. Okay, so that's what I had. Anyone, any ideas, suggestions, observations? You're welcome to come and tell me in person. I'm not doing this solo for any ideological reasons. I'm not committed to it. I'm just bereft one younger thought. Or, as I prefer to think of myself, as a grumpy old git. But there you go. Well, it all seems to be petering out. My apologies for the dead air and things, but I've talked about what I thought to think about. I guess we should end if my assistant, my kindly helper. Yeah, sorry, an attack. Yes, bugger when that happens. Hi, Real Raven. How is this soy level? Real Raven, do you want to come on and talk? I need someone to talk to. And everyone says hello to everybody else. Oh.
Yeah. John?
Hello.
I'm really sorry. I had to check on
That's
on the
okay.
little one.
That's
Then I
okay.
came, my little helper, and I said, "Oh my God, does he means me?"
Yeah, sorry, that was an awful expression. I didn't mean to be so condescending.
No. I don't care. But I was like, more like, "Oh my God, does he means me?" And I'm not here.
Well, it's because I ran out of things to talk about. I planned a certain amount of stuff, and I didn't know how long it would take. And so, as I say, I ran out of things to talk about.
You never run out of things to talk about.
No, I know, but there's a difference between a conversation when the other person can move the conversation along, and just a stream of consciousness when you're just babbling
I understand.
repetitively about something and your brain's gone blank because you know you need to keep talking, but you can't keep talking because what am I going to talk about? What was growling so loud?
I maybe would love to join, but I don't know what was the last thing I said. I apologize. I had to check on the little one.
No, I know what you said.
Yeah, he comes first.
Of course he does. Of course he does. No complaints.
So yeah, I would maybe like to weigh in, but I don't know what you just said because I wasn't here.
No, I was just babbling about some rather ill-informed conclusions I was drawing about the relative what's the word? good relations between various sectors of society that are traditionally quite disparate, all in their seeming opposition to the SJWs. But in fact, you could even argue maybe it's someone's 4D chess type plan, and I'm not talking trumpet. Okay, what you do is you push the SJW so hard that it stops everyone else being so tribalistic and unreasonable.
I'm curious. Could you really do that?
Well, I'm just saying that because I was giving 3 examples. Okay, so there was a right-wing evangelical Christian called Charlie Kirk on Dave Rubin. There's a left-wing Trotskyist called Brendan O'Neill, and then Sargon had a interview discussion with a Muslim leader in relation to the school protests in Birmingham. And all 3 were saying very, very similar things in very, very similar ways, and all being incredibly tolerant of other people, very libertarian in their outlook of, like, just. And I was also saying that, like in the United States in particular, that the evangelical right used to be a sort of behavior like the SJWs now. They were very authoritarian and wanting to tell people how they should live their lives and put it into law, and how it's taken their humbling and removal from such a prime dominant position to make them more accepting and tolerant of others. And thus that thought, you see, that maybe it was a cunning plan. You get this bunch of LGBT people to unite everybody else and make everyone realise that although we have differences, we have way more in common than that lot.
Yeah, but the problem is they don't care about how much in common you have.
Who don't?
You said all those LGBT people?
No. I'm saying that if someone's Machiavellian policy was to create them to get everyone else to unite.
Yeah. Well, that would be something, would it be? But sadly, it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there seem to be signs of it. People are seeing past their superficial differences to what unites them, and usually that is an opposition to the SJWs. Let's be honest.
Yeah. But I how to articulate it? Yeah. Thinking would it be possible, because sometimes I'm surprised how much the SJW culture and behavior has sunk into our society. That I'm like, now you know that we don't really watch here like mainstream media, right? We don't have a TV, and somehow I just thought that it's not as bad here.
Until you watch them.
But ever so often I sit in a car and Maud is listening to some radio, or I see something with a commercial on YouTube that has commercial, Dutch commercial, and then I'm like, oh my god, I didn't know we already had that here. That's terrible. This agenda, this pushing for things, So I think it's far even more than I'm realizing, at least in this country. So yeah, but it would be good.
Well, I think to be fair, that it's funny, when I was young, you had have you ever heard of Mary Whitehouse? Okay. For anyone who hasn't, Mary Whitehouse was she was a morality campaigner. she campaigned against filth, disgusting behaviour, and her and Lord Longford were a pair, and they became a byword. You can find her mentioned in song lyrics from the 70s. She was Pink Floyd did it in the album Animals. She gets a mention in one of the songs called Pigs, and what was my point? So, there's something about morality. Sorry, I apologise.
Yeah, but when you were younger, you started and.
Shit! I do apologise. I forgot what my actual train of thought was about Mary Whitehouse. She was this campaigner anyway, and she. Oh, dear, no, I've totally lost it. I apologise. If it comes back and it's worth the effort, I will resuscitate the thought. But
don't worry, I think we both are very, very tired. So
no, it's just that my if I go off far enough, I just literally cannot follow a train of thought back. A number of times I'll end up talking about it. I'll go, how on earth did I end up talking or thinking about this? No idea whatsoever.
I had to check something because of something a little one has. I had to check something online a moment ago as well, and it was in Dutch. And I'm so tired, and I've read it in Dutch, and it's very difficult for me to follow English. It's like I'm trying to following what you're saying, but I'm so tired that I barely can switch.
Yeah.
So I'm probably not making a lot of sense.
Well, I'm not, and I'm not switching, so you've at least got one up on me.
No, but you know what I mean. Like I try to follow what you're saying, and I try to switch to thinking in English, and I somehow can't.
No, it's okay.
And then you talk further, we tired, so forgive us. But I did like the story.
Sorry?
But I did like I do like the stream. I did like the stream.
Yeah. Well, it's just the whole notion of the biblical creation myth is insanely simple, and the whole point of my story is to be long, just to go through the basic mechanisms of it, as a juxtapose against the simplicity of the Bible story.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, actually, all this stuff had to happen, and it's really complicated, which is why I sort of sum it up towards the end and say, after only 13.7 billion years and countless generations of stars and so forth.
Yeah.
And then everyone kept nitpicking my details.
Yeah. I even wrote it in the channel act details.
It was just my story. I just sat and wrote it. I didn't research it and find out all the factual truths of everything. I just wrote a story.
Exactly. It's a story.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be,
Let's just say it's less inaccurate than the biblical version. That is not hard, but it is. Though Jimmy Stiff Fingers was quite upset I didn't mention lithium.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm not sure she's talking to that.
No, I was reading the chat. I'm really sorry.
Yeah,
but anyway.
No. So am I, and I'm not sure who Anatak is talking to.
Me neither. Anitrak, who are you talking to?
He says, we don't mind working with you, but who's the you?
Yeah, to get what is
Because
going
you could
on.
be talking to Real Raven, because Real Raven was...
No, I don't know.
I don't know if you don't have to listen to YouTube. We can if you like, Michael. You're always welcome, especially on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we're inviting people right now if anyone wants to join.
Yes, we do.
But anyway, anything else you want to discuss? You want to share?
No, I'm fine, and we've done the hour. We finally staggered to the 60 minutes, and I think in compassion to the long-suffering audience, unless Real Raven wants to come on, because I know he came late to the party, and you can tell us about whatever he's talking in the chat about.
Yeah, Sam, having to switch languages. Oh, okay. So it was to me. Okay. No, good. I didn't make it too bad. Mod won't kill me.
Oh, I don't think he could right now. I mean, put it like this, right? So I was chatting with him earlier, and I said something about, oh, my mouth feels so bad, I need to clean my teeth. And he's saying, oh, that's a sore subject, and seemed to go in a sulk.
Who?
Not.
What did he say?
Well, because I said I needed my mouth was feeling really gross, and I needed to clean my teeth, and he's going, huh, that's a sore subject.
Oh yeah. I went to just check on both of them. But yeah.
Yeah, I had
Right.
Richard Bayer, who's popped along. Well, we're having fun anyway, Real Raven, so that's all right. and so I had this, honestly, it must have been 9 hours. We were talking. Well, he was mending a vehicle. He seemed to be some kind of mechanic or something. And he was schooling me on British comedies of the 70s and 80s and 90s. Guy's got an incredible memory, and he's like, oh yeah, like such and such happened in such and such an episode, and I'm going, well, how the fuck do you remember that? I vaguely remember the characters.
But some people, will exactly cite the what was said in which episode.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And he was like, wow, and and he was really telling me what's what and putting right all my mistakes, and he was like, he's like, wow. I was so impressed. He was like, and the guy really likes his British television for some strange reason.
That too.
Yeah. The old British television. I mean, you could not possibly like it now.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, so it's like but he said something that was very odd to me, and as I'm the only Brit, I think, online at the moment, this might not make sense to anyone else, but there was a show called Are You Being Served?
Mm-hmm.
And it had 6 main characters in a shop. So you had Mr. Rumbold, who was like the floor manager. Then you had Captain Peacock, Mr. Humphreys and the young one whose name I can't remember, and then you had Mrs. Slocum and the young woman whose name I can't remember. Okay, and they were the 6 characters. And as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Humphreys was completely gay, right? And Richard was saying, oh, it wasn't at all clear that he was gay. And I'm going, yeah, of course he was gay. He was like the stereotypical camp gay of British comedy at that time.
No, I wouldn't know.
No, this is the thing. I realise I'm talking to the wrong audience. It's just that I'm really curious as to what anyone else thinks, because you know how sometimes you can be convinced everyone thinks something, and then you find out it's just you.
Yes, I certainly know that.
Yeah. So I had that over church music. I was in my 20s when I actually found out people liked it. And I'm going, what? People actually like that? That horrible, dreary, organ accompanied racket? That everyone feels like, you know, it's a penance to have to sing. You know what I mean? It's like no gusto, no excitement, no enjoyment.
No, with me it's also a different way, because my home when I was growing up was also a bit unusual.
Yeah, exactly, Johnny's list. Sorry.
So because it was a bit unusual, so I sometimes think that this is what you do in our culture. And like my friend who's also Polish says like, no. Or sometimes I don't know that you're supposed to do something, or indeed that people think something in general in our country or thought.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, that's the opposite. We really don't. Okay. I'm accepting it.
Yeah, but that's the thing though, because people do this, they generalize. And our circles of experience and acquaintance are very small.
Yeah.
And yet we and you know, and I say we because you know I've been there, done that. You just, it's something in you feels that everyone sees it the same way.
Yeah. Although my biggest, and maybe I'm going like with the example, maybe it's a bit of the subject, but we at the same time it is my biggest like red pill moment was so I say it good. In the short, there was a short period of time when I was trying to watch what other young women, girls were watching, those, how we call it, those series for a women, whatever. And there were certain group of women who behaved certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought, fucking hell, where they get those examples from? Who behaves like that? No one behaves like that. Friends were very few girls and mostly men. And when I came here to the Netherlands, really young, really young girl, and because I came as an au pair here, I had then female friends for the first time in my life. I was like, so females do behave that way. It wasn't only a pure comedy, it's really based on how they behave. That was like the biggest red flag, that some of way of female talking or thinking or solving different conflicts, big or small. I always thought in that movies or series that it's really stupid, and I haven't watched a lot of them because I lost interest, but I really thought it's really like, it's not like that. And then I was like, girls do talk that way. We really do it.
Well, there were two, I suppose the iconic series was Sex and the City. But before that, there was also Ally McBeal. And I actually both watched every episode of both and really enjoyed it.
Mhm.
because, and my wife thought exactly the same, because we'd sit there and we'd talk about it. We saw the plots as taking the piss out of the main characters, showing them up for utter morons.
Yeah.
And yet, so many thought that they were like being shown as good. It's like, no. You're showing how stupid they are.
I was too young to watch Ali McBeal like I would watch it translated in Polish, and it often loses, especially at those times. I think we got better over it, but I was at the age when we like I wouldn't watch really TV.
Yeah.
And I didn't watch Sex in the City actually mainly because some of the women I knew in my life were talking about it and about those episodes, and just from their talking about this, I actually thought like I don't want to see it. But you started to talk even some few weeks ago. We talked about it on Skype. You said indeed a different way why you enjoyed Sex in the City, and I felt like, okay, maybe I watch it someday, just a few episodes to see, because just by the way how women were talking about this series,
Yeah. I think.
talking made me not want to watch it.
Yeah. No. I think though, to be fair, programs can be very much of their time because you'll get something that by its existing will change the culture so that the examples include, right? So Lemmy, for instance, said he's old enough, he remembers before Elvis. And then after Elvis, it's like this line created in time
Mm-hmm.
that the world changed completely because once you'd had Elvis, you couldn't go back to how it was before Elvis. And
Yeah.
Monty Python were the same. After
Mm-hmm.
Monty Python, there was Monty Python. But before Monty Python, no one knew that. You know what I mean? And it's like certain TV series are the same. Sex and the City was one of those because after it, that was a new social norm. All the ideas were out there, and so you couldn't remember going. It's very hard to put yourself back in the space before it and then experience it for the first time.
Yeah.
I actually had this with Rin because I was explaining to her why Buffy the Vampire Slayer was so groundbreaking at the time. And at the time it was. But because it was successful, so many people have done similar sorts of things, you can't put the genie back in the bottle and go back to a place where before they'd had that kind of program.
Yeah.
But I remember, okay, they used to have a weekly listings magazine. And I was looking at it and I saw this program and it was at 6:00 on I think it was a Thursday on BBC Two. So not particularly mainstream. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I'm like really intrigued just by the name. And I didn't know of the film. I had not heard of the film. So I saw this Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Teenage girl fights things. And I thought, that sounds interesting. Because do you remember that Beverly Hills, was it 609 something or other?
Well,
Was
I
the
remember
most nauseating pile of shit ever. And to see a TV program where those sorts of people were being killed appealed. I won't deny it. No, seriously, it was so obnoxious. And I thought, this is set in the same sort of place, except for they're all dying. And so that's why I watched it. Because it was not wholesome. It was not twee. It was dark. You know,
Yeah.
even the heroes kept doing bad things. Yes, thank you. Even the heroes kept doing bad things, you know, and so it's like,
I haven't really watched it, but that's also due to my age. I was like, I wasn't a person when I was young who watched a lot of TV. I would read, I would draw, I would go out. It's also due to I would always fall asleep watching. I know now it's because of my sleeping apnea, but back then I didn't know and I wasn't wasting time. What I did notice, because there was of course a time when I was watching TV and then I wasn't. What I did notice is that a lot of people in class would watch some, like even that Beverly Hills something,
and put it in the chat 90210.
and I just didn't enjoy it.
Yeah. No, I mean, to me, you know, there was a whole slew of American. Oh, for a start, the American TV, and Roseanne was the first one I saw that broke this. They would always have a horrible little morality moment towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have this little story, and at the end, and it would all be, and this is why. Whereas in Roseanne, Roseanne was the main character, and she was horrible.
Yeah.
She was mean and vindictive and selfish, and funny as fuck.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, thank God the Americans do know how to make decent TV.
Yeah, I did watch. I do remember a bit of Roseanne. Yeah, indeed. And she was just more normal person to people, because we all have our selfish, horrible moments and all that. She was just, to me, always just a normal person like you and me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. They were blue collar people living blue collar lives with a lot of shit going on, and she'd like, there was this thing where someone would ring up chasing payment of a bill, and she'd be like, oh yeah, it's in the mail, and it was like this whole rigmarole she had for spinning it out.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you know, no pretense at being a good person or teaching any moral lessons, just comedy.
Yeah, just fun, just,
Yeah.
in front of the telly after a hard day of work, after you have to put up with your stupid colleagues or your boss who's an asshole.
Yeah. And and you have these groundbreaking programs that weren't nice, in the sickening way that nice television really makes you want to vomit.
Yeah.
And as I say, to young people who came after Buffy, they'd go, well, what's special about Buffy? But Buffy broke the mold because it had a teenage girl who was the superhero. That was new. It was set in a high school where the kids died. That was new.
Yeah.
And the main characters were not always good people. That was new.
Yeah, it's like but that's what you said a moment ago. When you are growing up to the moment when you start watching those movies or series and they're already existing, then you basically have it. But when you grew up in the time, or start growing up when it wasn't there, and
yeah,
then
exactly. And it's that change. That's the point. If you live through the change, it's different to it just being part of the culture.
Yes.
And the reason I was mentioning all this is so if you try to go back to watch Sex and the City now, it wouldn't be the same as having watched it at the time. Which is where I started with all this, because, you know, you would be hard pressed to understand or feel the same impact.
Yeah.
As there never having been a program like that before.
Yes. But
which is my way of saying, you know, I don't want you to build your hopes up too high and go watching and say, oh, John said this is good. Oh, that's boring or disappointing, because it would be. This is my point. It wouldn't be the same.
Yeah, I understand that, but I still wanna see it. I still wanna just give it a try. The thing is also that I'm not at the moment. I'm really not in the mood for a lot of action, a lot of dying. I'm just not in a place right now to watch those series, and there is so little out there. I'm like, there is nothing I want to watch from the new stuff. Like, I'm looking at this, especially now when I have a Netflix.
You do?
Yeah, but there is a reason for it because
No, you don't have to justify.
no, because it's funny. The reason is, like on YouTube you get suggested videos, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's very difficult to get only in Dutch language. And because our son has this, he developed speech so late, we basically agreed he can watch a bit more TV to get proper Dutch.
Yeah.
And Netflix offers that I can do something I could do years ago on a computer with YouTube, but I can't anymore. I can basically set it to only toddlers and only Dutch.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, occasionally, I get Taylor Swift in those little, like you see what you can choose, dressed really inappropriate for a 4-year-old. And last time, Netflix also thought that if I put toddlers only and Netherlands only, that would be a good thing to put the show in English and give Dutch subtitles. Netflix thought that's also good for a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
So many 4-year-old, they can listen in one language and read subtitles in the other.
Yeah.
On average, they do, they make my job easier so he doesn't get inappropriate things or things in English because he really doesn't need it at the moment. So I start to also look through Netflix and I'm like, I really understand all those YouTube videos from other YouTubers that were complaining about Netflix and nowadays series and movies. I really like, I understood there what I was listening, but now I really see it when I browse Netflix. Like,
Well, I've never had Netflix, and I've been quite happy to never have Netflix.
well, once I'm done with my son's Dutch education, I don't need Netflix. But
I mean, I'll have television because I like my sport, and if I didn't, I wouldn't have television either.
I looked out of curiosity. I looked for movies for women.
Mm-hmm.
I'm terrible with names, so I'm not going to and titles. But I've watched few of them,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, every single I've watched is that promoting that idea that women have it so bad, and women who are mothers have the worst. That's just the worst thing you can do is be a mother. It just, you rather be a fucking coal miner or work somewhere on the ocean, when you can just when you can just die because you just disappear under a giant wave if the things go wrong. No, rather do that than be a mother, and then how much they should be better, and the man is portrayed as an idiot.
Yeah.
And in every single movie, out of curiosity, I'm like, fuck that.
There was that. There was that article from Britain, and there was this woman who's feminist, and she's whinging, "Oh, my husband's so perfect. I wish he would cheat or something because I'm bored."
No,
and basically they've role swapped. Okay, but here's the important point: although they've role swapped, she's included swapping the not doing any housework. But I thought the worker had to do half the housework.
Yeah.
But no. And she even wrote about how she resented when he was doing something with the kids and she had to do a little bit of housework.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I see. So when you're the woman doing the work, you don't have to do the housework. But when the man does the work, he has to do the housework. Funny that, isn't it?
I'm sorry, replying to Anitrack, language will be basic request on YouTube Kids. Yes, Anitrack, and I think you can still do it, but you have to do it if you have a tablet or a mobile phone, and I don't want to do it. I let watch him on the computer, and on the computer you cannot do it. It's on other devices. And saying to you, it's like the argument, and I will agree, when I was way younger, because of how I was brought up and what I did hear from a woman around me, I thought it was legitimate argument. I don't anymore. There was like the woman stays at home and the man goes to work and he still has to do half of the chores in the house, yeah, because he uses everything. So the argument of the women was, you use the toilet, you use this, you know. But later, when I grew up and started to think about that, was like the other part of the story. It could be that the husband could say, okay, honey, I'll do half of the cleaning, please pay half of the bills, because you use the light, you use the water, you use the so, but it's something I grew up with, so I thought this is a good argument. And when I was younger but older, when I was in my 20s, I was like, no, wait a second. If you do work together, you either pay someone for cleaning or you share it 50-50. If you both working 40 hours a week, yeah, fine. Yeah. There is a small period of time in women's life when the man has to help, because, for example, when I was pregnant and then when I was just having a little kid, I wasn't able. I wasn't able.
Yeah.
But then, if the woman wants to do half of the cleaning because he's using everything, indeed, why she wouldn't pay half of the bills, because she's using everything.
Yeah, but we know that feminists are devoid from reality and science deniers. So to them, the inconveniences of pregnancy are just an oppression of the patriarchy, nothing to do with reality or anything. And no woman wanted to get pregnant, and no man asked her permission to get her pregnant. You know, because they're morons.
I remember, I usually don't go on forums, but I don't know, I was looking for something, and that was the first year. In the first year our son was born, and the Father's Day was coming, and some woman, and that was like, it somehow I end up on like 2 or 3 years on old subject on the forum, but some woman asked, hello there, blah blah blah, I'm new mother, the Father's Day is on the way, and our kid is just born, so I cannot do anything with the kid for the father, but do you guys have any nice ideas for Father's Day, right? And it looks like you have Mother's Day and it was a Father's Day, and she posed that question about the Father's Day before the Mother's Day, and the first response I hear to that question was like, Father's Day? First you look what he will give you on a Mother's Day, and then you can think what to give him on a Father's Day. And I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Not mercenary or anything.
That's that must be nice there in your household.
Yes, exactly. I bet you're a luck charmer. Sorry, I just want to address what Anitrack's saying about the one language, because I mean, Michael Keller's point proves it. There are 26 dialects of Swiss German. Languages fracture naturally. Funnily enough, I had a small criticism with St. Clair's recent video, because he was using the adoption of a language as proof that the speakers of that language had conquered the area, and language doesn't work like that. In fact, how language works is people choose the language and the rulers have no say in it whatsoever, because language is just what people speak. The reason Aramaic became the language of the Middle East at the time of the New Testament is because it was sufficiently close to enough other languages around it for it to be very useful as a common language, just as English is today. It's got enough in common with Germanic, Norse, and Romance, because it has roots in all those, that it acts as a common language. It's not that any of the people have any particular affection for the language, but that's not why you speak a language. You speak a language because you know other people will speak the language, and it works naturally. You know, no one imposes English as the language everyone speaks across Europe. It just happens. And so when you have this thing that people speak what they speak, and then you have accents, and then you have dialects where people create their own local words and their own local sayings, and before you know it, after several hundred years probably, you've got different languages. Latin and the Romance languages is a perfect case in point. French, Spanish, and Italian all came out of Latin. They actually retained a single spelling for about 1,000 years, till the turn of the millennium, by which point the local pronunciations had differed so much that the way they were writing the words was no longer a correlation to how they sounded. Then they changed the spelling, and thus you got the separate languages of Italian, French, and Spanish. But they all evolved naturally out of Latin. And that's what happens over time.
But that's what you said, something that language is spoken because people are speaking it.
Yeah.
It's like when I look how much Dutch language is changing, when I look at the history, Netherlands was always a trading country, and people just adopted language. They adopted words. When I look at naturally.
Yeah. Well,
because
it's evolved instinct is the ability to do language, because again, you see, I'm one of these who doesn't think AI will ever work, because I think the people doing it are stupid. And the reason I think they're stupid is they're doing it entirely the wrong way around. Because we have in us the mechanism for language. We don't even understand it, okay? People like Steven Pinker, who specialize in this field, try and work out how children are able to learn language fast enough, because they are not exposed to linguistic constructs that they are able to use, because they cannot have heard them all from their parents.
Yeah.
And so there is some innate evolved ability in there. And then you want to make a computer, and you see all these stories. Oh, the algorithms are racist because they object to black, because algorithms are inherently incapable of the job. A human cannot do the job, because you have to know a lot more than the pure words to understand the context, the intonation, and so forth, right? What chance has a bloody computer got? It's no good saying this word followed by this word followed by this word. It can mean so many different things. Is it a statement or a question? Purely on inflection.
Yes.
And
with what tone, what it said, and your face, everything that gives the whole context indeed. And I think you're right on that one.
You know, and so when you have language, you can't just do this mechanistic, oh, these are the words and therefore that's what it means. Because for a start, half of what we say is things like idiom, which don't mean what the words mean. And Mod said something to me the other day, and he said something about it, and I said, oh, that must be a Dutch idiom, because I'd never heard the expression before. And he said it in English, obviously, but it just didn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And likewise, when I talk to Alicia, who's an American, I'll say something, she doesn't understand me. She'll say something, I don't understand her, because it's not the words, it's what they represent.
Yeah, indeed.
And this is all part of the process of a language. I mean, they have noticed with the Queen, because she does these annual recordings for the messages at Christmas, right? So they've got recordings of her every year since the 1950s.
Yeah.
And she's become less posh and more common.
Okay.
Because, yeah, she has. She's literally changing the way she speaks.
Okay.
Over time. And if you actually watch these processes play out, and that's just one individual, and she's a very unusual individual, let's be honest, you know. Queen of England, you know, she's not going to get that many influences compared to most people. And then you think how people change, because sometimes how we sound is influenced by the expressions we use.
Yeah.
There was, when I lived up in Yorkshire, there were expressions we used which I only know how to say in the local accent. No, it's true. Because that's part of that expression, how it's pronounced. And all these tiny little influences are what go up to make a diverging language. I remember seeing some examples of Malaysian English. Well, it's called Malaysian English. None of the words are English, and I wouldn't understand a word, but they call it Malaysian English. It's like, okay, don't see where the similarity to my language is. You know, I mean, I can understand Anatak, she's got her Australian English. I can understand Alicia, she's got an American English. But I cannot understand Malaysian English. It's not really English anymore.
I'm sorry, I really need to chat about something else. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm afraid I can wax unlyrically about language forever, because I'm fascinated by language, largely because it's such a mystery.
It was it's interesting, but I also try to do good and pay attention to the chat.
Yeah. Well, Johnny's list. Well, apparently we have a nascent transsexual there.
Now
you don't have to be born a woman, Johnny. You can just transition. And then you wouldn't have to have the PMS, because you don't have a uterus as a transsexual.
Oh, Johnny, no. Right now we're entering an era, a time when it's actually better if you transition. Then I will get the free stuff as a woman, but you will transition. You will be the hero. You will be like getting orders and the medals and rewards for your bravery. You know, you won't just get free stuff. You will be just a hero for transitioning and talking about it, right, John?
Yeah, absolutely. You go straight to the top of the oppression Olympic stack. Yeah, I mean, and the best thing is you don't even have to undergo any surgery or hormone treatment.
No.
You don't have to change the way you dress. If you've got a full beard, you can keep your beard.
Man, it's man. Can go like that.
Yes. Yes.
Oh. I remember the time.
Iceland. Or do you mean he's written Iceland?
What?
So I was talking about the different Englishes. So Michael Keller asked, do you call that abomination of language they have in Ireland, not Ireland, but Ireland, as in a small body of land surrounded by water, English too? So I said, do you mean Ireland or Britain? And he said, Iceland. And he said,
Yep.
Ireland is German for... So I still don't know whether he just mistyped Ireland again, because Iceland, they're Danish. Which wouldn't be English. Which is what's puzzling me. Is like, okay, Iceland are Danish, so no.
I'm getting confused.
Oh, not just that, not just Australia and attack. But yeah.
Why didn't my body, my choice logic, no man should have to pay just if I want to hit you.
I'm not mocking you, Michael Keller. I'm just laughing at the fact that I am so confused. Danish. Yes, it's Danish in Iceland. So you did mean Iceland, and yes, it's Danish. And did you see that Trump wants to buy Greenland? And the Danes said, no, it's all right, thanks, we're good.
I see something, but
I mean, if I was Canadian, I'd start getting paranoid. They've already got the southern border, they've already got Alaska, and now they want Greenland too. Well, it's kind of encircling.
Yeah.
I mean, there isn't actually a landmass at the North Pole, so I don't think there's actually anything north of Canada. So it's as surrounded as you can get without conquering Siberia, I guess. Well, I don't know. I mean, I literally just heard someone say, probably Tim Pool, people mock Donald Trump for suggesting the United States buy Greenland, but Denmark said, no, we're good, thanks. Oh, for goodness sake. I don't get this thing about your birth certificate. There's sex and there's gender. Your sex never changes. If they just put sex, then there'd be no need for change.
You can change your birth certificate once every other year in some states here now.
Yeah, because of being transgender. No, that's what I'm saying. But why would you change your birth certificate? Because your birth certificate is supposed to be your sex, not your gender.
Where are you from, Anitrak?
Yeah, a lot of men could. Johnny's. She's Australian. Sorry.
every other year I can actually be man and then woman again, man and then woman again. Fucking hell.
But why?
It's weird.
Yeah. Well, it's the epitome of not having any real problems.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm going to be AFK for a moment. I have to check up on
Oh
little
my
one.
God, she's leaving me alone. I'll be, will I cope? Yes,
And then-
yeah, exactly, Anita. Just make it biological sex, and then the whole argument goes away. It's because they constantly, and I'm convinced, deliberately conflating the two. They say, oh, sex and gender are different, and then totally ignore that they've just said that and refer to it sex as gender. But it's like, don't care what your gender is. Don't put it on your official documents. Just put your sex. You've only got one. You're born with it. It's not assigned. Yeah, exactly, Michael Keller. Exactly. I did make a video on why I won't use the G word anymore. Limited to human. How speciesist of them to limit it to human. Especially after that feminist wrote about how milking cows was a feminist issue because it's yet another patriarchal exploitation of female bodies.
What? I just got back and I hear this.
Yeah, it's another one of those mad articles. This woman, it was like actually from a university. Naturally, it takes an education to be this stupid.
Yeah.
And she's like saying, as a vegan, consider my shock, feminist,
Of course you are.
dairy farming is both a feminist and a vegan issue. And it's like, of course, you can't have a single thing in your life that isn't a political issue for you. And therefore, everyone else.
But it's like those women often they put like daily things. It's like you have they you know they have their standpoints and they talking about how bad women are, but they put every single little thing new, and there are new things constantly. Everything is a problem. Everything is we us being oppressed. The other day I was watching some Polish YouTube channel, right? And the two women were talking, and the both of them are feminists. I think both of them. But anyway, the situation was that one invited the other for an interview to her house. And she had a cameraman on the crew, just cameraman to help with the stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she's like, okay, would you guys like to drink something? They asked for coffee. And then the other woman who's feminist says, interviewed, like that she is observing a lot of women behaving in such a way that they are just serve men and they are, you know, feeling like their men are more important. And she gave example from a moment ago when she said, look, you gave me coffee, and for whatever reason the cups were wet, right? There was water on the cups. So you gave me coffee, and you gave your cameraman coffee, and you didn't wipe the cups dry for me. I was doing it, but you did do it for your cameraman.
Yeah.
And she actually sees that as that the other woman just feel need to serve men, and that she feels worse and the men are more important. When the other woman said, even though she is feminist, she said, no, it's just that the cups were wet, that's true. And when you started to dry them, I started to feel stupid and uncomfortable that I served coffee badly. So I started to dry the cup for a guy because you were already busy with it.
Yeah.
Had I
Oh.
realized that from the beginning, I would do the both cups. But like, you know what I mean? Like every single little thing.
Yeah. No,
Has to be
I mean, it's like, someone comes to your home, you offer them coffee. The sex is irrelevant at that point, and yet it takes a feminist to make it about sex, the sex of the people. It's like, oh.
Yeah.
But they can literally take any situation, have it in either direction, and make it sexist.
Yeah.
Anything in either direction.
There's something I found out some time ago, that in Poland, when you're going to get married, they ask, in case you would have a child, is the child are going to have your name or the name of the father, the last name, or no, the both names or the name of the father, something like that.
Yeah.
But they basically very often just ask woman. Like my friend said, they just looked at me and then asked what I want, and I'm like, and they didn't ask the husband to be, and she's like, no, was really looking at me and asking me. Weird,
Yeah.
eh?
Yeah. It's a Tavistock agenda. I don't know what one of those is. But yeah, it's like...
Yeah, Michael Carenjon, boys and the men. Yeah, there's no. Here was a song. I think it was 1 or 2 years ago. The campaign "Let Boys Be Boys," and bunch of people got so upset about this that they stopped the campaign. And all they wanted to say is basically, yeah, boy will come back with the hole in his pants. Boy will come back dirty. Boy will be, rowdy and get into a fight a bit and climb the trees, and just let boys be boys. And people got so upset that they stopped the whole campaign, when there is always something for girls, right? There is always how you call it, inspiring girls,
Yeah.
them chances, making them, think from other perspectives. And I'm like, it's all fine, but where is this for boys?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, and we see that over and over again. It's the same with the advertising. Procter & Gamble advertised to women, positive; to men, shaming. There was that poster campaign in a Canadian high school last year. Very similar thing. Positive for girls, shaming for boys.
But I also don't understand, like you would say in advertising, let's say broader, just the commercials, right? What I don't understand is, like, when I used to talk with people on Facebook, when I used to be there, right? Someone posted something, some commercial, and there was a beautiful woman, blah blah blah, and the comments like, yeah, I understand how she feels objectified, and it's only about how she looks and blah blah blah. And I'm like, first of all, really, I sincerely doubt someone forced that woman to be in the commercial. Like, She's there, she's getting
Yeah,
money.
it's a job. Yeah, it's a job.
Their point was, yeah, but the message is still objectified woman, blah, blah, blah. So I put the Coca-Cola commercial up when there was clearly a guy being objectified. And I say, look, but it's happened to both genders in this commercial. Clearly, a man is objectified and treated like a piece of meat by 3 women, right? And then those people agree with me and they say, you're right, but they don't go further to say, and it's also not okay. It's like they would even, my friends, some of them not anymore, would even agree that I'm right. The man is also objectified, but nothing follows like, and I'm against that as well, or it shouldn't be there, or it's us, but nothing like that. It's just that silent, like, if it's a man, it's okay. We don't care. And that comes from men as well.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, in one of those interviews I was mentioning earlier, they mentioned this, you know, that women have an in-group bias and so push anything that benefits women and fight anything that benefits men, and men have an out-group bias and push anything that benefits women and anything and resist anything that benefits men. And the irony is, it's all this in the alleged patriarchy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. You got a Polak in here. Ooh, is he trying to be rude to Sam? It's an
Michael.
honourable country. Brave and noble people, perpetually oppressed by Germans and Russians.
Oh yeah, I am Polish, if that was your question.
Yeah. No, it's funny because when in the mid-70s I went to a school and they had a lot of Polish people working there who had stayed over in Britain after the war.
Yeah.
So obviously they were getting older, but yeah. Is Polak rude? I've no idea. Everything's rude. Everything's rude. We just have to assume. We just have to assume it's offensive.
I wouldn't know. I don't care.
No, I know. I wouldn't even have thought you did, and I wouldn't care if it was. But that's not to stop me mocking Mycroft or ribbing Mycroft.
Oy, oy, oy.
Well, you know,
But I was like
he's an American. He has it coming because of how he was born.
That's some time ago.
Oh,
I had.
it's spelled like that. It's the common name used for either of the two species of North Atlantic marine fish. Yeah, you've called her a fish, Mycroft. Seriously, I did a search on Polak. Well, Polak. I think it's Polak with one L.
Maybe.
Of course, I mock you. I mock everyone. Everyone should mock me. It's what we're here for.
And Johnny, men are just better at everything. That's why they get the big stage. Well, Johnny's apparently man is better also at being a woman. She's a man. A few years ago, got the best woman of the year award. So yeah.
Well, that was Bono, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Which is also the name of dog food. No, that's Bonio. Never mind.
I don't know how he reacted, but he should take the piece and just said he's really being insulted on that.
Yeah.
Times. Definitely strange times.
Oops, I've got a thingy. Right, so I'll try spelling it the other way with one L. Ah, yes, it's one L, Mycroft. That's where you went wrong. You put two L's in. You called her a fish.
You called me a fish.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, but it can be spelt with two L's. It is the Anglic. Oh dear! It's an Anglicization of the Polish masculine noun. So he misgendered you. That is very naughty, Mycroft.
Fuck,
Get you
dude.
kicked off Twitter for that. Good job you did it on YouTube.
You misgendered me.
Here we go. Definition of Polak at dictionary.com. A contemptuous term used to refer to a Pole or person of Polish descent.
Okay.
Now, honestly, as an Americanism, I did have the sense that it wasn't a polite term for Polish people.
I wasn't sure. I heard something somewhere, but I don't care about this stuff and I forget it always. So
yeah,
I was
it doesn't matter. I mean, it's like apparently in Northern Ireland, calling someone a Brit is insulting. Well, I'm a Brit because I'm British, and the abbreviation of British is Brit. And Britain sounds stupid. And so I'm a Brit, and if someone wants that to be insulting to me, I will steadfastly refuse to be insulted by it. I will steadfastly not give a monkeys.
Exactly, it's a word. It's a fucking word. Someone asked me some time ago. I had a conversation about kids and bullying at school, right? And how we protect them. And I did say, I basically did say that that was just about calling names and stuff like that. And I say it's just words. Fuck it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Exactly. It's just a sound. And if you give it power by letting someone use it as an insult, you're doing that. You're giving them power. So it's like.
Yeah, but so many people said to me over the course of those conversations, like, yeah, but you know what? I was bullied with names like that at school, and I can relate to that, and blah blah blah. And I was like, and I did want, and I was, for example, protected by my parents or my older brother or whatever. And my standard question is, okay, and imagine that you didn't have all those protection, but someone would teach you how to stand up for yourself. Imagine how your life would look now.
Yeah.
It's like, to me, it was very like, okay, so when I started to be like, I was like in my young 20s or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
I saw the show, and some woman, I think, was traumatized by the bullying that happened to her at school.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore she didn't want to go, like, I don't know, was it a reunion or someone that she would meet this person? And she was like adult woman, she was 30 plus something, and I didn't understand because I thought, like, you were 17, for God's sake. You 30 something. Don't you realize he was a stupid teenager?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, it sticks with you, but then you, like, you're almost 40. You were stupid teenagers. But it starts with school, like sometimes there are some group of boys that calls my son something, not really something dreadful, but people see it as a teasing, and someone asked me why I don't do anything about it. I said, yeah, he sees it as a fun. It's only word. What do you want me to do? Chase them off the playground?
Yeah. No, I mean, that report, Tim Pool's thing. Oh yeah, these algorithms are racist, and it's because different communities use the words, and it's all right if these people do it, but not all right if those people do it. Now I'm like, yeah, that's the problem right there.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to make it matter what your identity is, and it shouldn't.
One more time, sorry, because I was reading chat. I apologize.
No, that's right. I'm saying they're making it about your identity. They're saying, oh well, when black people call each other the diminutive of Negro,
Mm-hmm.
then it's all right. But if a white person does it, it's not. And I'm like, that's your problem, because it shouldn't be like that. You can't.
That's racist. You deny me to use a word just based on my skin color.
Well, yeah, and it's stupid. It's like.
I mean, as long as black people will use word nigger, I'm going to use it too.
Well,
because
the point is, I don't want to use it. But
Huh?
the point, I don't want to use it. But the point is, having that rule is retarded.
But my biggest problem is like I've never ever called anyone a nigger. I never said that.
No.
But if I'm going
Technically,
to
I've called myself one, but while singing along to Patti Smith. Because the line is, I'm a rock and roll nigger, and therefore I've called myself it when singing along to Patti Smith.
But I never called. But if you're going to, there was a professor who got fired because she talked about the book.
Yeah, that was recently. Yeah.
Yeah. If I'm going to quote someone, talk about the book, I'm not going to say N-word because it's ridiculous.
Well, as I say, the whole concept is retarded. It's a word.
Yeah, there was like, I've watched it. It's really old one. I don't remember which TV station. There was like 3 people, the interviewer and the 2 of them, and one of them used word nigger while quoting something.
Yeah.
The woman goes like, oh no, you don't say that word on my show. You don't say the word on my show. And what pissed me off that the guy started to more or less explain himself that he's only quoting. His response should be, listen, you invited me to speak. You're not going to tell me what to speak. You don't want me to speak on your show? Bye.
Yeah. No, I don't say it's retarded. It's just a sound. At the end of the day, it's just a sound. And if you try and ban a word and give it a special status, guess what? It'll only encourage people to use it. The only way you get it to fall out of use is to not give a shit about it, to deprive it of its power. But yeah. I'm sure there is some justification, people saying.
And something else, he'll be stronger for having to negotiate those social things in the playground if there are no actual sticks and stones or relentless attacks by groups of children. Then you are right. And yeah, thank you, Anitrak. He doesn't speak yet, but the thing is that I don't want, like, of course there is limit to everything, but I don't want him to bother too much. I always, like, the kid said something and asked me why you're not bothered, and I said to the kid, because what you're saying is actually saying mostly about you. What you say and how you say things says about you, not me. So I don't mind. And people are very overprotective.
Yeah. Well, and it's not healthy. It's like too many leeches that kill all your bacteria, then you don't develop any immune system. You end up with all those allergies.
And by the way, you too, Michael Keller. Thanks for coming.
But yeah, it's like, but this is the problem. It's like once you start, I mean, it's the slippery slope argument. Yeah, once you start accepting the principle that it's okay to say what's okay or not, you will never run out of things to add.
Yes, sadly.
Because how many people does it take to find something offensive? For instance, you were talking about those stereotypes, and there were two recent. Somebody did a video recently, though the cases from last year of British adverts that got punished, and for one of them, okay, there are 66 million people in this country. Do you know how many complained about this advert?
2?
3. 3 people. I bet you couldn't put up the most anodyne advert imaginable and not find 3 people to complain about it.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's like, what the fuck are you paying attention to these things for?
There was someone asked Peterson about being offensive, and he's like, okay, so I can't offend anyone. So what if I talk to 10 people? What if I talk to 1,000 people? Do you think I can talk to 1,000 people and not offend even one single person?
Yeah. Sorry, I just got a message on the Discord.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Read the chat, John.
Sorry, I was just replying to the dog of Sinope.
Yeah, but read the chat on the stream.
What is the latest slogan promoting tourism to Poland? It's safe here and Christmas is fun.
And this is because I'm not sure.
Oops. Oh, goodness. Yeah. Well, it's up to you. We've gone over 2 hours already, so it's up to you already.
No, it's up to you. You're the host of the...
I don't mind. I could probably talk the hind legs off a hind legs off a donkey. Yes, I do apologize for my retardation. It is strong. Oh goodness, which window am I in? I don't know.
I had because the Microsoft is what is the latest slogan promoting tourists to Poland? Come to Poland, your car is already there. But had different jokes that 2 Poles were went to the other country.
Mm-hmm.
No, the one Pole was already in the other country, and the other one came to him, and he's like, come to the Netherlands. He said, "Come, I'll take you for a bike ride." So they left the house, and the other one was like, "You told me we are going for a bike ride, but I'm walking." "Oh, don't worry, you'll come back on a bike. You'll come back on a bike." That sounds better in Polish.
I'm sure it does. Especially if I was actually listening properly, instead of trying to work out what the hell I'm doing. Remember, I'm old.
That's okay. I'm getting there.
Yeah, well, you see, it used to be Irish jokes for the British. Thankfully, we've grown out of it. He's not answered. Is there a delay? Is there? I get confused.
Who's not answered what?
Well, you said Mycroft wants in. I asked him which account he wants me to give the link to.
Okay.
And he's not answered. Stanislas, the fire prevention bear of the Polish National Forest Service. What? Oh.
I don't get.
Who wears a forest ranger's hat and carries a can of kerosene? Yeah, but to which account do you want the link? Domino effect. Okay. Now, what's the word? The Americans can't talk because they can't even pronounce Polish names properly. For instance, at the same time, Thomas Lewandowski, Polish centre forward who plays for Bayern Munich. He used to play for Borussia Dortmund.
You pronounce it.
Corey Lewandowski. It's the same name, but the Americans can't pronounce it properly.
How do the Americans pronounce it?
Lewandowski. Lewandowski.
How you pronounce it?
Lewandowski.
Great.
No, it's like there was an American playing for Chelsea, and he's got a Slavic name. He's even got the accent over the C to indicate you pronounce it ch. Okay, so it's itch, something itch. And the bloody commentators say ick, and I'm thinking he's got a bloody accent over his name.
Yeah.
This is how dumb Americans are when it comes to pronouncing things. So they can't. So they have no legitimacy in making Polish jokes. But yes. Oh, hello. Oh, he's muted.
Hello.
You are muted, young man.
This is the warning I'm having.
What am I looking for? If I knew what I was doing, it might be a little bit dangerous. Oh yeah, I remember it didn't work, did it? That's okay.
So Mycroft. I assume you're Mycroft, right? Welcome there.
Yeah, it's the Mycroft Holmes from the Benedict Cumberbatch version of Sherlock Holmes, by the look of it. You know, it's funny because in all the Basil Rathbone and oh god, who played Watson opposite Basil Rathbone? That big fat bumbling guy. Don't recall them ever mentioning Mycroft in those. Did like Basil Rathbone as Sherlock Holmes though. This is how old I am. Because everyone else who played Sherlock Holmes came after that, and yet he's the one I remember first, and then only saw these other people later in my life. It's like Robin Hood will be forever Errol Flynn to me.
Yeah.
Okay, well, he came and he muted.
Yeah. Why are you muted, Mycroft?
Well, I heard it snowed. There was a thing on the BBC which said the kangaroos of Australia have some very rare snow. I mean, sort of tropical. Oh, he's gone again. And he's back. And he's gone. And he's back. And he's gone.
It's working now. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, young man.
See my fucking. This is, this is why I hate Google, because I swear to God, they fuck with everything.
Yeah.
For some reason, a different microphone that I don't actually have was selected in the fucking list. And that's why my fucking Google Hangouts wasn't working.
Oh,
now I know.
No, to be fair, between them, Microsoft and Apple have always been the same, and Google are just determined to be the best at it.
John, I have to say, you are a sexy fucking beast. Why is it every time I see you, you're never wearing a shirt?
Because to me, this is warm. It is.
Okay.
Hang on. You're going to have to get your calculator out for this one. It is 21.8 degrees.
I live in a desert, so I'm gonna have to tell you. Buddy. I think
It's not very warm, but it's not cold either. It's just pleasant.
It's 70 degrees. That's nothing.
Yeah, I told you.
When that's warm to you?
It's comfortable.
Well,
I have 23 degrees in the house, and I'm wearing a blouse at the moment because I felt like I'm a little bit cold from all that sitting. Great.
The way I
it goes up to, if I was to step outside right now, it's probably about 110 outside right now.
Yeah.
Fahrenheit. So that would be
too fucking hot. Just too fucking. I have this expression.
43C.
I'd be warm in bathing trunks at the North Pole.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, not 110, 105. My bad.
Oh wow. A little over 2 degrees.
Excessive heat warning actually going on right now. So what that means is that all the homeless people and the elderly are in the process of dying right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have in Arizona, this is a funny thing now that we're talking about the weather. In Arizona, we have rehydrating stations for the homeless, and it's literally it's a guy who gets to sit out in the heat all day long with a little syringe, and he's just ready to like stick that into homeless people to like pump fluids into them, because that's how bad it gets out here. Yeah, no, I'm not even joking. Like, I actually drive past one. Like,
no, sorry, I was laughing at Johnny's list. He said, "Enough of that gay talk." I think he better be a bit more specific as which gay talk he's objecting to. And just remember, there was just a man and a woman on the visual side of this earlier. She didn't complain.
I actually saved the racy Polish jokes. So like I wanted to roll this one past the. I don't even know her name. What's her name?
San.
Do you have a name?
San.
San?
Yeah, S-A-N-N.
Sure.
San.
I don't is okay.
It's a diminutive.
How do you take? Well, I don't know. I'm not European.
No,
I
I'm
don't know
saying
these
it's a
things.
diminutive. It's, like Bob.
San?
Like Bob is short for Robert,
Ah.
or Dick for Richard, or,
Well, I'm just gonna call you Jennifer. That because that we'll just go with that. So Jennifer, how do you take a census in a Polish village? Did she die? What happened?
She might have gone to check on her little one.
Okay.
Or her kid.
But this is such a good joke.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. I'll save it for later.
Yeah, that's good.
What was the you guys have been going for what, 2 hours, right? What was the point of the stream today? Is Modwayne dead? He had like a bad tooth or something?
Yeah, he's got an abscess.
Oh man, that sucks.
He's in real agony and he needs treatment.
Yeah, that's what they say. Like tooth pain is supposed to be the worst pain.
Oh yeah, I had one right under my front upper front tooth. The only thing I've had that's more painful was the injection into the nerve that they did prior to the operation to drill a hole into the tooth.
You mean the Novocaine injection? The Novocaine injection?
I don't know what it was. It was just, he just hit a nerve and it was agony. But it was worth it.
Yeah, it's kind of weird though when you think about it, because like that's supposed to be the worst pain that you can possibly get is like tooth pain, like mouth pain, right? But that's also the same tissue that actually like heals the fastest, whether it's the gum or the tongue or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah, I know, I told them, but I made a joke about it. I said, your little one or your son.
Oh, no, my son.
Yeah, no, I know, but I
made
a joke.
I am back.
I don't know your name, so I was going to call you Jennifer.
Okay, do you see 4 up on the chat? Anattack, San, S-A-N-N.
Stan?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, Stan. How do you take a census in a Polish village?
I wouldn't know.
Roll a quarter down the street, count the legs, divide by 2, and subtract 1 for the Jew who catches it.
Okay. Not, but okay.
Nothing? Okay. I gotta work on my joking, apparently.
Okay.
No, see, so,
are you
a lot of these
Polish people or something?
No, I got no problem with Polish. I love Polish people.
No, I'm not saying you have problem. I'm saying you are really prepared. So, are you Googling right now the jokes?
I am Googling Polish jokes because there's so many of them. There's just so many of them. Like there's I had the choice between the traditional Polish jokes and then like the racist jokes from Britain and then the racist jokes from the US. And I haven't even I've got so much here.
Yeah.
Is it like really? Is it like?
I'd much rather be unintentionally offensive than just attempt to do it
directly.
For sake,
Okay.
because it's not very original.
What is? Well, I like is the so here's the thing. Like I found this out that it's like in the U.S. nigger is a bad word, right?
Uh-huh.
Nigger's like the
Yeah,
worst
we were
word.
talking about this earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I keyed into the stream right when you guys were talking about niggers.
No, we weren't talking about the people. We were talking about the word. Not
Oh, they're
the
people
same
now.
Thing. No. We were talking about the word.
Well, so I found out that about I was like 3 years ago that British people view the word "packy" the same way as
Not
nigger.
quite.
Well, that's what I was told.
Yeah, I know.
Then again, my source was Robin Gething, so you know you can only trust that guy so far, yeah. But yeah, but I didn't, the Polish immigrants
it
and
does
whatnot.
not have a fraction of the emotional baggage.
Well, you could have fooled me because Robin fucking flew off the handle about it. I asked him if he had a packy.
I mean, I didn't say there weren't oversensitive snowflakes, but what I mean is there is a very deep and long history to the American term. There is no history at all to the British one.
Well, no, like so, like he was going on about it though. Like the packy was the same thing as nigger, right? And I asked him, like, don't you? I still remember this because I remember his response. I asked him, like, so don't you guys have like a real big packy problem in London? And he just flew off the fucking handle about it, like it was the end of the fucking world. Why? I don't know, but there was, then he explained.
As I say, but you see, this is what I don't understand, because there's many British people who be like, it's a word. It might be in bad taste, it might be offensive, but it's just a word. You know.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of fucking. Who was Andrew? Was it no Chris Cuomo? Chris Cuomo was just going on about. It was a big joke in the U.S. about he was saying like Frito is like a nigger for like the least effectual Italian in the family, right? And there was a whole fucking big stink about it because he almost got into a fight over it. I don't know if you saw the video of it, but like he was going on about how
I just saw a non-issue. It's like, for goodness sake, what's wrong with people? Someone was mean about you. You have a career being mean about other people, for fuck's sake. Grow a bloody thick skin.
I mean, no, I feel like he's like in the running for that. What was the fucking CNN guy who got into it with Trump? That's no longer relevant whatsoever.
I don't care. Literally don't care.
Okay.
I know you mean, but I couldn't tell you his name. But then I don't CNN.
Yeah, I don't.
Ever.
That's the funny thing. Like, I don't even remember the guy's name now. But like, he was getting into it with Trump. He like got barred from the press campaigns and all that.
He did assault that woman. And according to the his own side, that was a serious assault, because according to their side, anything as violent as that, as snatching a microphone, well, that's beyond the acceptable to them.
Yeah, Jim Acosta. That's who I'm thinking of. He's like basically going for Jim Acosta. Basically, like he's going for that level of status now because he got called Frito, and like that's the big thing. Like it seems like Cuomo basically like takes himself to be like the actual Frito of his family, because he's like the least successful of an extremely successful family, mind you.
No, but I mean, how do you get, like, if someone just said it, how much effort would you have to put in to work out that you were being insulted?
I've never even heard Frito before this whole thing.
Well, the best thing is I heard he was called a Frito. I saw a video title, and then someone wrote Frodo. And I thought, no, I'm pretty sure they don't mean the Hobbit.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't. I mean, look, I've heard plenty of disparaging remarks I don't know, about Americans being like fat and lazy, and then there's also like the ethnic jokes you can make about, like, from my, I'm German and Irish mostly, and then I've got like a little bit of Greek and like Malton, I found out.
That is a weird combination.
Yeah,
Where do you start with the stereotypes on a Greek, a German, and I mean, you first start, you're on the practically four corners.
Well, no, I mean, like in the US, they just call you white now. So,
No,
like,
but I'm saying, but it's practically four corners of Europe. You've got right down in the southeast with Greece, right up at the north, almost east with Germany. You've got Ireland on the extreme west, and then Malta on the south.
yeah, no, it's kind of weird. Like, so my family, half of them are Scots Irish, so like not true Scots, not true Irish, but like,
Oh well, you've got a world of pain just there.
Well, I mean, and so those are the ones that actually came over to the US like originally, right? And then on my dad's side of the family, we've got Volgan Germans, which the Volga Germans were the ones that went through. They were like Eastern Europe, like Germans who went up and they migrated through Russia during this. It was like probably in the 1920s.
Yeah.
They migrated through there, and then those are the actual Germans in my family.
So obviously
they went through.
So obviously you are so guilty of being a slave owner because you didn't migrate there until 70 years after the end of slavery.
I mean, it's more likely that my family that came from Europe proper, like came from Ireland and migrated over. It's more likely that they were actually like indentured. But yeah, but I'm white,
Yeah, exactly,
so therefore,
exactly. But this is my point, and therefore you are clearly due to give Black Americans reparations because you are clearly a descendant of slave owners, especially the ones who came over after the end of slavery.
Well, I mean, technically, the whole reparation thing's going to hit everybody, but
well, it should never hit anybody. It should never get off the ground. It is nonsense.
Well, you say that, but like pretty much every Democrat out there right now is running on that.
They're all guaranteeing they will never be elected again, aren't they?
Hard to say. I mean, Biden. I don't know if Biden's actually picked up on the reparations thing. They're pretty much trying to hide him out of the limelight right now.
Yeah, but they also want to, let me see, have open borders, forgive student debt, bankrupt the country, things like that,
Well, I mean, that's it. I don't think it'll bankrupt the country, but it'll definitely put a fucking huge
you
ass
have open
dent.
borders, right? And then you offer all the illegal immigrants, health care and things, right? And you pay off the student debt. It's not one thing. They literally have no concept of money.
Well, no, like it depends. It depends on. Okay, so as far as like student loans go, what the Trump administration has essentially tried to do, and I agree with it, is essentially they've gone through and they've opened up refinancing of student loans to private institutions. So basically, all of the loans that were held by the federal government, the ones that you weren't allowed to write off or refinance into like a personal line, you can do that now.
Yeah.
You can do that now. You can refinance those under a private bank, and then as soon as that happens, then it's real easy to get that shit off of your history. And so what I see like what I see Trump doing is essentially saying, if you're smart, you can get rid of these debts. And I think the idea behind it is anybody who's that far behind on their student loans, right, is going to basically take any method possible to basically wipe that off of their credit bureau. Yeah. And they'll find interesting and, intelligent ways to do that. but the people who aren't, the people who basically have a lot of student loan debt but will be able to pay it back, will still pay back most of that debt. Now, if you just go and wipe all of that clean off the fucking board, you're talking about massive losses for the banks.
Yeah.
You're talking about
And
massive
who
losses
ends up
for
propping up the banks? The taxpayer. Yay!
Yeah, well, no, I mean it will right back to it.
I mean, the point is this.
I mean, it's not only that though, but like if you go through and you write off all of the student loans from the federal government, I can imagine that even in the U.S. government, the stringency of new loans for education, but maybe that would be a good thing. But the stringency of like new loans that will actually come out will be much higher, and people will have a harder time actually getting loans to go to school.
This would be my argument for not mitigating it, because the kids have to learn. You don't go to college to get drunk and go on your spring breaks, and you go to get an education to further your life prospects. And the whole of this insanity coming out of universities is entirely in nonsense subjects of zero intellectual value.
Well, it depends on what they're going for, but like
I'm talking about the insanities that's coming out of
here's the thing. I'm completely fine with somebody walking out of a university with $200,000 worth of student loan debt if they're going into a law degree or a medical degree and they're going to be able to pay that back.
Exactly.
If they want,
exactly, and this is my point. Plus, the other thing is, okay, if you look at the way the administration of American universities have become so bloated, that is all adding to the amount of debt. And those bloated administrations shouldn't have been allowed. Why is it possible? Because it's all just pushed onto students through this student loan debt. Well, if students start saying, whoa, I just want an education. Why on earth is my education? I mean, V did a great stream about this earlier today, and he was saying, writing off student loan debt means that the working Americans who never went to university but got a trade or something end up paying for the student loans of these useless bloody degrees. And why should they? And the point is, the point is why are universities so expensive? And they've got these huge human resource departments and this counsellor and that counsellor and all these centres for this group and that group and the other group, and it's like,
well, really? I can come at this from a simple underwriting perspective. I think that the reason that personally what I would do, and I know that lefties will hate this, but what I would do is I would privatize all of the student lending. I would give that over to the banks. Let the banks actually actually look over the risk tables for student lending.
That would not go well though.
I think it would go fantastically.
No, it depends on which way you're looking at it. The way I'm looking at it is this. It would be immediately prone to accusations of racism and other discrimination.
Well, the banks always have to deal with that shit.
No, I know, but that's what I'm saying. And so your most susceptible community to that agenda are the people you're going to subject to it. You with me?
Yeah, but the federal government pushing out loans is still subject to the same accusations of racism and all that garbage. Like I would honestly if you put it in the bank's hands, they'll actually be able to put people in charge of looking over the actual risk. Because here's the thing: underwriting a student loan is extremely difficult because you're looking at somebody who's going to perform well on repaying a loan 5 years out. and it depends on the degree. It depends on like who's co-signing that debt. These are things that you the federal government, if they're just like fucking flipping out money all day fucking long, like here you go, everybody gets to go to college, right?
Yeah, but
They're
that's
not
that,
they're
and
not
that
they're
is
not they're not
that is
they're
the
not looking at
problem.
that shit.
That is the
They're
problem.
not
We've
looking
got
at
it
that.
here, and we've got it here.
But this is why. But this is the thing. This is why that the federal student loan debt is being sloughed off to the actual banks now, because the banks are actually looking at this debt like, why the hell did you give these people money, right? And there was a whole bunch of debt that the Fed was actually trying to sell off to a couple of banks, Wells Fargo and Bank of America, and they don't want to take it because the debt was so bad. But because it's student loan debt, people aren't allowed to write it off. So it's just stuck there now, and the debt will go away when these people die, basically. So that's really it. That, or they'll get a judgment on them from a court at some point, and then they'll have to fucking get their wages garnished in order to like repay that debt. But no, what I'm saying is just take that out of the federal government's responsibility. Fuck all the student loans that are coming out of the fucking federal government, because they obviously don't know what the fuck they're doing. Give what you can over to private banks as they stand now, and then all student loans should, from here on out, be actually at the administration of a bank, because an actual bank is going to look at candidates seriously instead of just flipping out the cash. That, or we can go the Bernie approach and just make it all fucking free and then write off all these debts, and then we can all suffer the consequences of that.
But here's my point: is I understand what you're saying about giving management of the debt to someone who will actually be a responsible lender. I just don't think that's the whole picture. I think you also need to
No, it is the whole picture.
No, can I finish, please? I also think you need to tackle the other side, because we're not teaching in schools the kids to think well enough about what they're going to do, why they're doing it, and whether it's even a good idea in the first place. Because we had it here, okay? Tony Blair came in and he said, right, we've got this big change in society. We're going from manufacturing to a knowledge economy. We need everyone to go to university. And everyone's like, yeah, okay. And so they increased the places to pay for it. They up the fees and so forth. They started to introduce debts here when they hadn't been here before, but they didn't discriminate in terms of what people were studying. And so if you're going to widen who can go to college, you are generally decreasing the level of IQ. If the top 10% go to college, they're the smartest top 10%, right? If you want 50% to go to the college, the people at 50% aren't as smart as the top 10%.
Some of the smartest people I know didn't go to college.
I'm not
they didn't go to university.
That. Think statistically, please.
We're talking generalities?
No, statistically. It was always the brightest who went to university, or mostly the brightest. A large chunk of the brightest. If you're going to have a much larger proportion of the population, you have to have a much broader chunk of the IQ spectrum. So you have to have less difficult courses for people to study. And then you have to say, okay, exactly what is the benefit of that to the student?
I see why you call yourself a communist now. This is a lot of social planning, man.
I'm not social planning anything. I'm merely observing.
Yeah, you are.
I'm not planning
stuff. You are though. You're talking like IQ statistics. I mean, like, come on, man. For fuck's
sake. If you cannot recognize that the distribution of IQs across a society varies from high to low, and if you take a bigger chunk of people, you will have a wider spread of IQs, I can't help you.
But I'm sorry, I do agree on that with John. I mean, you cannot expect everyone being able to study certain things, and as you increase the population of people going, indeed you will have a different range of IQs, and those people has to study something as well.
No, why? Why?
Because not everyone is smart enough to study medicine. Not everyone is smart enough to study engineering. Not everyone is smart enough with those things, and to do simpler courses indeed. Because nowadays, even when you go for a more simple job, they want you to actually. They look if you have been to the university.
You don't. No, they don't. You don't have to look. I'll give you two examples. Myself and my father. All right. My father managed to work his way all the way up to being a director of marketing for a very large casino. No degree whatsoever. I work in finance. I have no degree. I have learned through many years how to tailor my craft to actually make myself palatable to employers. And I have learned underwriting. I've learned credit analysis, and you don't actually have to go all the time that you're going to university for those 4 years. You could, if you're not going for a highly specialized degree, you could be learning all of that shit and earning money at the same time.
Exactly. This is our fucking point. Why are you arguing with us against our own points?
No,
Micro.
Nobody acts. You don't have to go to university.
I know. This was my fucking point to start with, that you need to also educate your children as before they go to university as to whether they even should. That was the very point I made.
Okay, well, yeah, but if we go back for a minute here, you were talking about a whole bunch of social planning shit.
I wasn't talking social planning. I was talking measurement of data. It's not planning. I'm not planning anything. I'm saying that if you took a measurement of the IQs of the people when 10% went in the 1960s, they would measure on average much higher than they do now. You've got 40% going. This is just a fact of data. It's not about it's not about
as long as we're
planning.
As
I'm
long
not
as we're
saying what should be. I'm saying what is as a fact.
Well, as long as we're all agreeing, then, so that's good.
And my whole point was starting by saying it's not enough to only look at who issues the loans. You have to teach people to choose a good route in the first place.
But they won't even be able to get those. But here's
Michael, I'm sorry, I'm trying to answer to you because you said you don't need to degree, but I wasn't talking about the degree. Indeed, you don't need the degree, but you definitely need certain IQ to do your job. Your father definitely needs a certain IQ for doing the job he's doing.
Yeah. He taught himself. He learned a lot while he was going through. He read a lot of books. He read a lot of marketing wisdom from a lot of different people. My dad had an entire library on it. I used to sleep in that fucking library. Yeah, and he taught himself, but it was because that was related to his job, his profession, his specialization, and he didn't need a university to explain that to him. He learned basically what happened was he went into a job. He realized that there were particular things that he did not know, and then he taught himself those things, and then he added to his own repertoire. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. You know, I'm sorry. Like I know plenty of people with bachelor's degrees that don't remember a goddamn thing from college. And what my dad did is he actually looked at what he was trying to do, and he learned things that were actual practical knowledge that he could apply to his particular career. You don't need a 4-year degree for that shit. You can rise to the top of a company simply through especially when it comes to something like a casino or like even a retail outfit. You don't need a degree for that shit. You don't need to have $200,000 worth of student loan debt to rise to a good paying job where you're going to be able to, produce and have children and all that crap. You don't need it. But in my view, I think that we've been sold this idea that you do.
That was my whole point. That was my very point. You argue against me, and that was the point I was trying to make, that there's this notion you should go to university, and we shouldn't. We should be teaching kids to think about it and actually consider whether they even should go to university.
Yeah, because well, I'm glad we're agreeing then. We're agreeing, so it's fine. It's whatever.
And I was saying that you do that in parallel with the loans, so that you are tackling the problem from two directions instead of just one.
Are we at least on board on privatizing student loans, though? Can you agree with that?
Well, personally, first, you've got massive cultural differences between countries. I mean...
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's different in the UK, I'm sure. I don't know what's going on with you guys.
In the United Kingdom, as I say, they introduce student loans. They are a very prescriptive system, and it has to be the government. You're not allowed to take out a private student loan here.
That's why.
Don't know. Didn't write the rules. Don't agree with the rules, but those are the rules. It's actually illegal. You're not allowed. The banks cannot lend. But we have an inherently authoritarian government. It's always been inherently authoritarian in this country.
Yeah, that's true. Come on. Duck, duck, go. Don't.
Oh, sorry. You're roboting a bit.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. 1 sec.
There's a few other things on this list, but yeah. I mean, I close all the universities and say, right, private companies can set up universities, and then they get to pay their own way, and therefore students will think,
No, there's private loans. Are they just subsidized by the government in the UK, or what? Because I'm looking at Future Finance right now, student loans, which is a UK-based private company that does student loans.
Okay.
And this is, I mean, they're offering a 13.41 variable rate over.
Fuck's sake, that's steep.
Well, I mean, it's
steep. That is steep.
Yeah, but you gotta understand, like the repayment on a student loan, like they actually they marginalize the repayment. So like, it's not like a car loan, right? A student loan, you're only going to be paying back maybe $25 per month. It's a very, very small amount of money. And then they usually stretch that out over about 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
So typically, this one's only doing 83 payments. So what is that? What is that, 9 years? This one's only 9 years, but yeah, no, there's private financing for student loans in the UK.
Must be misunderstood, but
loan term of 101 months. Yeah, so this is what they do. This is the thing about student loans. This is why I think the U.S. has taken the approach that you can't write these loans off. Because typically with a student loan, even if you've borrowed $50,000, right, you're going to have to repay that in 15 years, which means that your payment is going to be like $25 per month, right? And who can't afford $25 a month? And then you can pay ahead, of course, because well, I mean, I don't know how it works in the UK, but like the current in the US, there's the typical way that they do it now for all loans is that there's no prepayment penalty. That's been the market standard for like the last, I don't know, decade. So anyway, privatize the student loans. Do it.
Well,
get the government off your back, baby. Just get it off your back. You don't need it.
it's not on my back. I've not got a student loan.
Oh. Anyway. Well, I'm glad that we all agree about everything.
Very unlikely.
Yeah. I'm still waiting for you to explain to me how you're a communist, John.
I'm not a communist.
Socialist, whatever.
Not a socialist either.
What are your lefty positions? Just out of curiosity.
I understand that large corporations can be as big a threat as government.
Was that it?
Mhm. I don't have this hard on for governments and think the market solves everything, because not all markets are free.
So you're just like anti-libertarian then?
No, I'm I'm an anti-economic libertarian.
Catch a bitch! I fucking knew it.
Well, economic libertarians are morons, so
I agree. I think libertarians are among the dumbest people on the planet. I put them slightly above communists.
Okay. Open borders. Well,
Yeah,
it depends
it.
on the house. So you spell borders as somebody staying somewhere, not the border as in the boundary between two places. So I'm taking the piss. I do this. I like taking the piss out of language.
Yes, you do.
I do. It gives me
John likes to screw around with words.
I do. I like screwing around with words.
I remember you had that argument with what was it, Wayne? Oh man, that was fucking great. Oh boy.
No, God, who was it? Someone on one of the interviews I watched recently, and they were saying, even if you go back to all the, all the bogeymen, Stalin, Mao, whatever, they were nationalists. They were their country first.
Even Lenin or who?
No. Stalin, Mao, people like that, right? And they're saying
Pol
the problem.
Pot, Tito.
Pol Pot was a frigging whack job, but people.
Is that where we draw the line? Pol Pot.
Oh, Pol Pot was something different, but the problem with the modern sort is they're globalists, and there's nothing in left wing about the globalists. I mean, they're corporate puppets.
Well, I've met quite a lot of international socialists, so
yeah, I'm sure they are, but there's nothing left wing about the corporatist agenda, globalist agenda. They're just idiots who've been subverted to the opposite of what people used to believe. I mean, people supporting the likes of Google, for fuck's sake, the evil empire.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's funny. Like even like the semi-fashy guys that I've known in the past, big fans of Stalin. They're like, socialism could work if it wasn't for all the black people. Basically, that was their
You
position on
see,
it.
and this is why I tell you I'm not a commie, because when I grew up, the communists were the enemy. The communists was the authoritarian system we hated. Because I grew up in a country that had troops stationed in Germany against Russia.
Right. Well, so are you basically like you're a socialist in the sense that you're anti-monarchist, essentially?
No,
right?
That's a Republican. That is a Republican, and it says nothing about your economics.
Okay. So, what is your preferred economic school exactly? If you say modern monetary theory, I'm gonna fucking throw a chair.
If I say what?
Modern monetary theory. That's the new one that people are throwing around these days.
Never heard of
Yeah,
it.
don't look into it. It's fucking trash.
Yeah, all monetary theories are trash. I understand that we have a mixed economy. We always have had a mixed economy. We always will have a mixed economy. It's just a matter of how mixed it is. And I want much, 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 much less government. That's my economics.
Trying to do the math on that one. So you like, I don't even know how that would work.
What, to have much less government?
No, I understand. Well, I mean, yeah, no, you sounded more like a libertarian than you are a socialist.
No. A libertarian wants no government. I am not anti-government. I'm anti-bureaucracy. And bureaucracy is Google as much as it is government.
Well, whenever I think of socialism, I think bureaucracy. So I'm not sure how that.
Yeah, because you think of the distortion of socialism that came after Marx. But prior to Marx, that wasn't socialism at all. The problem is at Marx's time they'd never had a state. There was no conception of what a state was. You can look at it now, 170 years later, and say, well, this is what a state is. No one had that conception 170 years ago. All the people who were socialists back then, they didn't even have a vote. They had no rights.
I have to introduce you to
Geo,
because
they were literally lower class citizens. That's what they were fighting for. They were just fighting for the right to be an equal citizen and to have a participation. They had no conception of what state ownership meant. And the whole point of Marx, which we covered in a stream a couple of weeks ago, is that what he said in 1848 was for 1848. He was explicitly against prescribing anything for the future, because it's up to the people of the future in their own situation to determine for themselves what is good. And if that happens to be capitalism and small businesses, which is exactly what they were pining for in the first place, then fine.
I have to refresh my drink here, but John, I have a question for you before I mute real quick. Do you think that Venezuela was socialist?
I know nothing of Venezuela, and I don't care.
What about Yugoslavia?
I don't want socialism. I don't like socialism.
John, you will forever be a mystery to me, my dude.
See, and this is the point, because sometimes you are in a space that other people cannot conceive. It just happens.
All right, well, I'm gonna go refresh my drink. I'll be right back. Sorry. Also, I just want to say, John, you are a sexy beast, and never wear a shirt ever again.
When it gets cold. Are you saying I sound like Richard Spencer? Take that back.
Are you guys even still streaming right now? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah? You know, I found an amazing Richard Spencer remix, and I'm totally going to fucking put that in the chat, like, once we're done here. And you can all just bask in the glory of Richard Spencer. He's a wonderful gentleman with a wonderful haircut.
He's what's the word? Controlled opposition?
Well, Paul is currently under the assumption that he's a Fed, so
That's
you know.
what I said, controlled opposition.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about Paul, but it makes sense. Especially the amount of airtime he gets on CNN.
Yeah. Well, no, I've actually been predicting this because, like, there's been some Pew Research recently that actually shows that. Let me bring it up. There's some Pew Research. I retweeted it. Where is it? Some Pew Research that basically shows that Democrats are extremely against Israel. So
yeah, the left are anti-Semitic. We know this. The same here.
Well, I mean, my view on it, if you look at the alt-right, their whole fucking thing is hating the Jews, right? And
it's such a stupid. I mean, okay, there was a long history of anti-Semitism in Germany and much of Europe, and what the Nazis did built on that legacy. The idea of Americans today making that a platform is insane because you don't have that legacy.
Well, no, I'm just saying, like.
No, I'm just saying, but it's like, you know, it's like, I'm not, you know, this isn't obviously isn't a defense of the Nazis, but you saw where their feelings came from. But for the modern American to have that view, it's just like just plucking an opinion out of thin air. There's nowhere for it to have come from.
Well, here's the statistics, right? So, according to Pew, percentage of people who say that they have a somewhat unfavorable view of the Israeli people is at 35% amongst Democrats. And then when you go over to the Israeli government, it jumps up to 67% for the Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is compared to 18 and 32 for Republicans. Republicans are actually pretty fucking squared away on the Jews and Israel. Very happy about the Jews with the Republicans. Palestinian people. Now, this is the really funny thing. Now, if you look at the Republicans, when it comes to Palestinians, percentage of people who say that they have a unfavorable view of the Palestinian people, Republicans say 62%. They don't like the Palestinians and the Palestinian government, Hamas, 81%. I know. I'll give you the fucking Pew Research. I'll post it in the server. You can take a look at it yourself. But it's actually really telling. And what I find really funny is with the white nationalists, you'd think they'd be like far more on board with the fucking Democrats, because the Democrats clearly have much more like going on with the hating the Jews shit. So, food for thought.
Well, I'm just saying that there isn't that clear historical continuity that existed in 1920s and 30s Germany.
Well, no, I was memeing on that earlier. Actually, the whole idea that somebody was jocking me in some other chat earlier about how you can compare the U.S. to Weimar Germany. We're essentially the same thing, apparently.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely not. Chalk and cheese, black and white, up and down. What other extreme opposites are there?
No idea.
It was a rhetorical
According-
question.
Well, I mean, according to the internet.
Oh yeah, because the internet has a single view, B, a sensible view, C, an informed view.
But this is the question for the white nationalists, right? What's more important? Owning the libs or getting rid of the Jews? What's more important?
Well, who wants to get rid of Jews?
I don't,
No.
but the white nationalists do.
Yeah, well,
I can't.
okay,
Well, I can't tell you. I can't tell you. I can't tell you how
why do
many.
people talk about white nationalists? There's like about 3 of them huddled around a coffee cup somewhere. That's how important they're not.
Well, no, I listen to a lot of white nationalist content because personally I find them fucking hilarious.
No, that's not what I said. Everyone talks about
No,
the
but
white nationalists.
there's more than
Everyone
there's
talks about
more
what they
there's
want.
more than just a
Everyone talks
couple of
about what they
guys
hate.
huddled around a fucking coffee cup, dude. Like there's more than
The
there's more than you
330
mention.
million of you fuckers, right? How many of them are white nationalists?
Do you want a head count?
No, I mean just an ish. You know, a few 100,000?
Worldwide?
No! 330 million for you fuckers.
Oh, in the U.S. I don't know. 10,000 active at the very least. Probably
yeah, right,
another.
10,000 out of 330 million. How many Antifa
No. Active 50,000. Probably like 60,000 total. I would say 50,000 inactive.
Nothing. It's still nothing. How many Antifa are there?
How many communists are in the U.S.? God, I don't know. I lost count.
Antifa.
What's the difference?
Because not every communist in Antifa.
Well, I'm not saying every every Antifa member.
Oh, for goodness sakes, just stop quibbling with literally everything I say. I just asked you how many Antifa there are. You can answer that question. Why do you have to make it about? But do you mean communist? No, I would have said communist if I meant communist. I said Antifa. Jeez, and then we end up quibbling about whether they're the same or different. Fuck.
Well, no, I view.
I'm asking a question on a train of thought. You do not know where I'm going with it. Therefore,
I don't separate.
Fine,
I don't separate
but
Antifa
I asked
from.
you how many Antifa there are. If you don't separate them, then why even bring it up?
Well, I don't even know. Fucking. I don't know. Let's throw out. Let's throw out a random number. Let's say there's a million Antifa out there.
Right. Thank you. The point being the relative numbers, and the Antifa have apologists in the media. They will not be called out by the Democrats, the politicians.
Yeah, okay. Communists.
Yeah, right. So my point being this: you've got a tiny number of alt-right who get zero support from anybody outside themselves, and then you have a huge number of communists who sections of the media and a major political party will refuse to criticize.
Okay, so there's here's something to understand. I think that I've actually come to this conclusion pretty recently. The white nationalists play the game of the 1%, right? The 1% are the number of the percentage of a particular population that they'll need to have in order to spread their bullshit and get people elected into office, and then take over the country and in enough of a way to spread their ideology. And then when I look at the communists, because the Antifa and communist people are so fucking retarded, typically they need about 10 or 15% of the population to actually get their shit going, because they play the shame game. And especially like in the US, the shame game's not exactly fairly fucking popular. It's not popular anywhere really when you think about it, but they're not as effectual. So and if you've ever been in, like, well, I'm sure you have, Sean, Captain Communist over here. If you've been in the socialist circles, they're not actually looking to do that. What they're looking to do is actually like change the way that people view the world, and that goes they do that through their education, whatever the hell that is.
Well, that is nothing I have experienced in my life. But then I lived in different times when I was involved in politics.
You sharing, John? Because you play with words a lot. Where'd that come from?
What do you mean?
What do you mean? What do you mean? What I mean?
No, I'm sorry. You said the left are like this, and you were sure on the basis of nothing that I was experienced of that, and I'm telling you I am not, and therefore.
Okay.
You know, people hear a few words and they read so much into it. That is their problem.
I'm looking into chat now. Who's behind open borders in Europe? Well, that would be George Soros, obviously.
Right.
The international Jew. Oh boy. No, I will say this though, like the funniest fucking thing that I've seen is that a lot of the white nationalist guys are actually taking the position that Tlaib and what's her name, the crew, the four, what is it, Cortez, Tlaib, what's her face? They're actually like
the squad.
Yeah, they're taking their side because they're actually calling out the Jew problem, which is really funny to me, because they've spent the last, I don't know, decade fucking arguing about Muslim immigration into the UK, but all of a sudden they're just they're all for the little brown girl squad in the US. It's really fucking funny. That's why I say, like, I don't really know where their priorities are. It's like, is it about creating the ethno state, or is it getting rid of the Jews? Like, which one is which one takes priority?
I really give them zero thought.
I do. I think they're fucking hilarious.
Well, that's fine. But you see, here's the thing. I have met one, maybe two racists in my life.
Only two?
Yep.
I've only met one, and that was ages ago. And he just didn't like black people because he got beat up by black people when he was a kid.
Well, yeah, but no, I mean, it's a bogeyman just created to distract us from the shit the retards on the left are doing. Every time they do something bad, they say, "Oh, but no, look over there, they're bad," and there's nothing over there. Just 12 people attempting a march.
Yeah, well, I explained that already. It's because they're playing the game of 1%. The white nationalists do not like it was really funny to me that the Charlottesville thing actually even happened, because that's completely out of their character to do something like that. The whole like unite the right thing. Typically what they do is they just simply try to get people elected into office that share common views, right? And then those people are then funded by people who believe in the same things. That's why they were trying to get, what was it, Paul Nealon elected in, was it Wisconsin?
No
Trying to
idea.
take,
Anyway,
yeah, well, that's what they do.
I'm going. Sorry, it's late and I haven't slept for about 36 hours, so I'm going to stop the stream now, if that's okay. Sorry.
Okay. Well, good
Well,
talk, buddy.
Well, yeah, but it's just that I'm sorry. This subtopic holds absolutely no interest to me whatsoever.